Budget Committee. We are in session 2 of the continued Select Budget Committee meeting. Today is November 18th, 2020. The time is 2:00 p.m. I'm Teresa Mosqueda, Chair of the Select Budget Committee. The Select Budget Committee is back in order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Lewis.
Present.
Councilmember Morales.
Here.
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Councilmember Sawant.
Here.
Councilmember Strauss.
Present.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Herbold.
Here.
Councilmember Juarez.
Here.
Chair Mosqueda.
Present.
9 present.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I hope folks had a chance to get a little bit of lunch. We're going to continue with our items on the agenda. We are in section D3 on our calendar here for the discussion today. This is including items in voting group B. We are walking through the consent package of amendment items 126 through 160 on your agenda. We're going to continue where we left off, and that was on item 140. Thanks again to our team from Central Staff, and I will turn it back over to you to walk through the item very briefly. And then if council members who are sponsoring the item that is currently listed in the consent amendment package would like to add any additional context, you're welcome to do so. When we get through the list here, you'll still have a chance to identify any items that council members would wish to remove for individual consideration. Thanks for bearing with us as we get through this rest of the list here. All right, turning it back over. Hello, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next item on the agenda, item number 140, it's HOM 18A2. The title is adding $100,000 from the general fund to HSD to support the Social Service Provider Academy. This is sponsored by Councilmember Herbold.
Councilmember Herbold, additional comments?
Sure, thank you. This proves the old adage, if you try again, eventually you get there. Really appreciate Chair Mosqueda for putting this in the package. I made an effort to champion this last year and really appreciate the success of that effort with your support this year. Students will complete 25 college credits, and in doing so, they can earn Housing and Homelessness Service Provider 1 and 2 certificates. The program began this year in September, currently has 21 students enrolled. Students were recruited and referred from Plymouth Housing, Catholic Community Services, Chief Seattle Club, Mary's Place, REACH, and DESC. Racial identity of this cohort were 13 Black African-American folks, 1 Native American, and 7 white people. The majority of the students have lived experiences of homelessness and housing stability. And again, credits from the program are transferable to Seattle Community College's 2- and 4-year degrees. So we are helping folks who are out doing the work with lived experiences in advancing their careers and advancing their leadership in this area. So thanks again.
Thank you very much. I will also just add, we continue to hear stories of folks who are providing services on the front line, both as human service providers and within our health system. And we know that there is quite a few people who are leaving due to the stress and the very low pay of the situation that we've been trying to address over the last few years. We took some of that on last year and the year before with our efforts to make sure that there was a cost of living increase that folks who are contracted with the city had not received in over 10 years. And I just want to lift that up as we think about the importance of not only investing in services, but making sure that those who are contracted out to provide services also are able to have a living wage and additional protections, especially as life is so stressful right now. So thanks to all the work that they do. We'll keep working on lifting up those wages as well. Moving on.
Item 141 is HOM 21A1. It adds $800,000 from the general fund to HSD to support the operations of self-managed encampments. The vision for the self-managed encampments here would not utilize a homelessness services agency, but instead would find creative ways to work directly with groups that are the cooperatives of actual residents of these tiny home villages. This is proposed by Councilmember Sawant.
Thank you very much. And I know Councilmember Sawant and Councilmember Morales had items on this, and we are happy to see it included. Councilmember Sawant, would you like to provide additional context?
Just very quickly to say that we have seen different models working really effectively, and there's no one size fits all. So we have the model where it's not self-managed, and we also have the model where it's self-managed, and we believe that it's appropriate to allocate some funds for self-managed encampments as well. We've seen successful examples run by organizations like Nicholsville, and we have heard overwhelming, powerful testimonials from residents of these villages about how that actually works well for them, and it promotes community building, and it promotes a real sense of sort of feeling that this is our place and we are responsible for it, which I think contributes a lot to also the mental well-being of people who have been through a very hard time. The experience of being unsheltered is so devastating. So I think that this is appropriate, and I appreciate Councilmember Mosqueda adding this into the Group B.
Thank you very much. Additional comments or context? Seeing none, thank you very much, Councilmember Sawant. Let's keep going.
The next item, number 142 on the agenda, 142 is HOM 22A1. This would add $80,000 from the general fund just one time to HSD for a vehicle resident outreach and parking offense mitigation project, similar to what the scofflaw mitigation team does as currently and was currently funded in the 2020 budget. This was proposed by Councilmember Mosqueda.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, this request for outreach and parking offense mitigation and flexible financial assistance for vehicle residents came to us from the folks who are currently providing critical services through the scofflaw program. We know that there's been a 30% increase in the number of people living in their cars due to the economic crisis. And we want to make sure that we are providing folks who are living unhoused an opportunity to have access to critical services. The scofflaw mitigation program currently relies on volunteers and donations to assist with individuals who are living in their vehicles to help them avoid tickets and be in safe places to park. And we really appreciate the partnership that the scofflaw mitigation program has with entities like University Heights, who I understand is interested in working with them to make sure that there is a pass-through of funding to be their fiscal sponsor. We want to reward all of the important work that they are doing, which really does help prevent more people from being outside in the elements and making sure that people have the services that they need. Very happy to see this small part included that would include assistance for outreach staff, case management, and financial assistance to restore the ongoing services in next year's budget. Thank you very much. Seeing no additional comments.
The item is 143. It is Law 2A1, and it would request that the City Attorney's Office work with central staff to research and prepare draft legislation for elected Community Oversight Board over police accountability. This is sponsored by Councilmember Sawant.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Swan. Anything else to add?
Thanks to Asha for the description. I think the need for this is painfully self-evident, unfortunately, because we know the current police accountability structure is simply not working. One case in just is how none of the officers involved in killing the 8 people, members, just since Mayor Durkin came into office, have not faced any discipline. I understand that such a meaningful overhaul would require several legal steps to come into effect. It may even need a charter amendment, and this statement of legislative intent requests the city attorney to work with central staff to prepare that full legal pathway to implement genuine community oversight of the police, and I really hope Councilmember support.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Swan. Just want to note it's a little hard to hear you, but I think we got all of that for next time. And I want to appreciate your office and the central staff's office for working to finesse this to help ensure that this was a combination of work that central staff will be doing to look at various options. So thank you very much. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Item 44 is CBA Ledge 003-A-001. This is sponsored by Council President Gonzalez. It would add $200,000 to the Legislative Department's budget to correct pay disparities among employees performing the same or similar duties who have discrepancies in pay. It would hire a consultant to support a search process for a permanent central staff director, and it would fill a vacant but unfunded central staff analyst position to relieve significant capacity constraints, particularly in the subject areas of community safety, police accountability, and labor standards and regulations.
Excellent, very important. Council members, Council President Gonzalez, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just be really brief. Thank you, Lisa, for that description. It's pretty inclusive. This is just an opportunity for us to have a small additional amount of dollars to accomplish the things described by Lisa in order to ensure that we continue to have efficient operations in the legislative department and continue to be able to provide the basic services expected of the legislative branch. So this is a modest increase to our operations to allow for us to do that. We did have a pretty significant budget reduction before this. And so this is just sort of a minor correction to allow for the division directors through the council president's office to do the three things that were described by Lisa in her overview of this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President, and I'm very pleased to support this item. I think it's critical as employers that we're addressing pay disparities, and I appreciate you advancing this so that we can act as good employers. Overall in this budget, I think folks have seen that we are trying to lead by example in making sure that there's not pay disparities and also wage theft when we know lots of folks are working from home, so we'll keep addressing that. And I think that this is a reflection of the values that we are putting forward to make sure that issues like this are taken care of. Thank you so much. Let's move on.
All right, Yolanda Ho, Council Central Staff. Item number 145 is OED 5A1, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. This would add $58,000 of general fund to OED, Office of Economic Development, for the Special Events Program Lead position. This additional funding would fully fund the Special Events Program Lead position that was added by the Council in the 2020 adopted budget. Would just note that the 2021 proposed budget would have shifted $58,000 of general fund of the salary savings from the elimination of the proposed elimination of the nightlife business advocate position to this position, which was intended to be supported by emissions tax revenues. But due to the steep decline in tax revenues, a portion of the position's costs are needed to be supported by general fund. CBA CW1A4 would restore the nightlife business advocate position, which was described by Karina previously, but it did not provide the additional $58,000 of general fund for the special events position, which resulted in the position being partially defunded. This position is intended to support permitting and policy development related to special events and other large-scale activities.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Strauss, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Yolanda. As Yolanda mentioned, this funding will restore the Special Events Program Lead position in the Office of Economic Development. Earlier in the budget, I'd proposed a position in OED to serve as a coordinator for farmers markets and so that they could produce the product of the statement of legislative intent on how to streamline bureaucratic barriers for farmers markets to receive the permitting and city support that they need, as they are independent organizations that provide fresh food from farmers to markets here in the city. While I still believe that we should explore adding that position, it became clear to me that even more important is to maintain the existing resources and this position in particular. In addition to the position's usual work, it will be tasked with completing the work in the statement of legislative intent that I just mentioned. And from a conversation with Office of Economic Development, it does seem, along with Councilmember Morales's proposal for the Creative Industry Policy Advisor, by funding those two positions, Office of Economic Development has given me their, they've committed to being able to produce the statement of legislative intent, in which I just discussed. And so this amendment also includes language to prioritize the farmers market work in the future. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Yolanda.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I know it was really important for us to be able to make sure that that good work on farmers markets was going to be able to happen. So appreciate that you got clarification and confirmation from OED that that will go forward with these two pieces that are in our consent agenda amendment package. Okay, Next
All
item,
right.
please.
Sorry. Item 146 is OED 6A1, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. This would add $50,000 of general fund to the Office of Economic Development for workforce development activities. This would fund an organization that connects low-income job seekers in Seattle and King County with opportunities in the building and construction trades and at the Port of Seattle, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, such as port jobs. This funding would be eliminated in the 2021 proposed budget.
Excellent. Councilmember Strauss.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Yolanda. As Yolanda said, this $50,000 would restore the City of Seattle's contribution to programs like the Port Jobs program. Port Jobs is one of the only workforce development programs currently providing in-person services due to the airport's status as an essential service. Airport jobs are beginning to come back slowly, and creating new opportunities for Port Jobs to connect with clients is an important opportunity we should invest in. At least 20% of Port Jobs customers are overwhelmingly BIPOC, refugee, and immigrant community members. Staff members. And Seattle's funding is only one portion of this program's funding, and so this is our portion of funding a larger program for our regional solutions. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Yolanda.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let's go to the next one.
All right, item 147 would be OED 900B1, sponsored by Councilmember Morales. I would just note the document attached to the agenda has the incorrect sponsor, but we will correct that in the future. This would cut $14,000 one-time general fund from the Office of Economic Development for the Creative Industry Policy Advisor position. This would effectively delay hire of the Creative Industry Policy Advisor until about February of next year. This position was added to the 2020 adopted budget to advance OED's creative industry sector strategy with marketing, stakeholder management, and policy research and development. Just for reference, OED 900A1, which had been included in the chair's balancing package, would have cut all $164,000 of general fund for this position, delaying hire until 2022.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Councilmember Morales. I will speak to this one if that sounds okay to you. This was really a rounding issue that we were trying to deal with in the budget. Knowing that the position has not been hired for or posted, it could be a delay, as Yolanda described. It also could be a posting at a slightly lower salary. Wanted to make sure that we maintain this, though, is why you see the $14 million reduction. Just want to underscore before I turn it over to Councilmember Morales, this does still, though, retain $150,000, and that's the big takeaway here. So, Councilman Morales, I know you were a big champion of this. I'll turn it over to you to explain that position.
Thank you, Chair and Yolanda. I really appreciate your work in helping us get here. It is important that we fund this position. The intention here is for this position to coordinate OED's interdepartmental work for the economic recovery and to create programming and support policy development, particularly as it relates to creative industries. And this is important, especially for recovery, because this was a growing sector before COVID. You know, we had a lot of major events, musical performances, other performance venues that were shut down and continue to be shut down. And so because this is a growing industry and one that provides good middle wage jobs and that lots of people of color are moving into, we thought it was really important to continue to prioritize this so that as we move into recovery, we aren't sort of caught flat-footed with the potential growth of this industry. So really appreciate all of your work to keep this position funded, and I look forward to having my colleagues' support.
Excellent. Thank you. Wonderful. Let's move on to the next item.
Thank you. Item 148 is OH5A1. This would add $150,000 for pre-development costs for a proposed housing development project in the central area. This is in addition to the $100,000 that was included in OH4A2 for the same purpose that was adopted in Group A. So this would make a total of $250,000 available for pre-development costs for this project in the central area. And this is sponsored by Councilmember Sawant.
Excellent. Councilmember Sawant, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ali, for that description. This is very important in our view, even though it is $250,000 for pre-development and not the entire construction project itself. We do think that this is an important step forward for what is going to be a full square block of affordable housing in a very prime city center location, which is on Yesler Street, Yesler Avenue, where we used to have an Asian American retirement community, which was then dismantled. It was bought by a corporate developer, even despite the protests that were carried out by community members. But we can see that the protests were effective because we are here now where the council is considering approving this, which I would really appreciate council members' support on this. And I also wanted to thank everybody at the Africa Town Community Land Trust and everybody who has been advocating on the people's budget and the solidarity budget.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Sawant. And as Councilmember Sawant noted, this is additive to the other 100 million, that'd be nice, 100,000 that is made available for those pre-development costs. So the total for pre-development costs is $250,000. Again, recognizing what we talked about previous, that there's around, I believe, $13.8 million at the Office of Housing that they have indicated is available for the use of the Africa Town Land Trust folks as they create this great new space for shelter and much needed services. So really excited to see that. I know that there's an application involved, but we're really excited about the assurances that we've received that there is the capability to move forward. And that's what the pre-development costs are reflecting here. Excellent. Thanks again for bringing this forward.
Next item 149-OH6B1 would add $200,000 to the Office of Housing's weatherization program to increase funding for converting homes from gas or oil heating to an electric heat source. This is sponsored by Councilmember Sawant.
Thank you, Councilmember Sawant.
The demand from the environmental community and the indigenous activist community, the urban native community, has been to have at least $1 million added for next year for the ramp up towards 2022, where the Amazon tax that our movement has already won will be funding, increasing the funds for weatherization projects to allow low income and working class homeowners to move from gas or oil heating to electric, as Ali just stated. This budget amendment that's included here will add $200,000, but just as council members already know, I have an upcoming amendment to add $800,000 per the request of the community.
Thank you, Councilmember Sawant. And just to provide additional clarification about the $200,000 amount, in conversations with folks, including MLK Labor, Sierra Club, Sage Climate Solutions, Mosca Talks, and others, what we have heard is that there is a desire to make sure that there is this on-ramp for the $20 million that will become available, as Councilmember Sawant noted, from the Jumpstart progressive payroll tax for a large investment in creating more sustainable energy sources. And as the city gets ready for electricity conversions and weatherization programs that are going to be beginning in 2022, it did become clear that about $200,000 was desired to be able to ramp that program up. So I'm happy to see this, at least this component accommodated for, and look forward to the discussion on the form you referenced, Councilmember Sawant. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item 150, OLS 1A1. It is sponsored by Councilmember Morales, and it would add $50,000 to the Office of Labor Standards to implement recommendations of the Domestic Workers Standards Board that was created by the Domestic Workers Ordinance that went into effect about 1.5 years ago. The additional funding would support one or more of the following board recommendations: develop and expanding services to domestic workers to help them access their rights established by the ordinance, to collect and analyze data to understand how the community is responding to the ordinance requirements, developing additional or new enforcement methods, especially to address the reasons that may account for or discourage workers from accessing their rights or reporting violations, including the power differentials that can exist between workers and hiring entities, and also to develop an online portable benefits platform for domestic workers. Just to note that this money is additive to any funds that Office of Labor Standards has already designated for domestic workers implementation. That would include $50,000 that they've earmarked for outreach to hiring entities, and the broader worker outreach fund that is called the Community Outreach and Engagement Fund. And I didn't introduce myself, but this is Karina Bull with Central Staff. And with that, I will turn it over to Councilmember Morales.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Karina. We all know domestic workers have been on the front lines of this pandemic, exposing themselves to considerable risk as they take care of children, tend to the elderly, and clean homes. So as Karina mentioned, the funding for this is to help implement board recommendations to increase education and outreach about the domestic worker ordinance. So OLS has done a really great job at the outreach and education for employers and for their responsibilities and domestic workers about their rights. But we have, I think the estimates are over 33,000 domestic workers in Seattle. So clearly there will be more work to do. I also do want to address some of the confusion that an earlier caller seemed to have. The domestic worker ordinance will not be impacted by this. That is in effect. OLS has the staff to implement funding for this work. They have a policy analyst. That work is happening. They are, as city workers across the city are stretched, particularly in dealing with some of the issues we have around COVID. But I just want to be clear that the $50,000 here is in addition to the $1.8 million for worker outreach and for the business outreach that OLS is already is doing. This is about supporting the standards board and making sure that that work is done for community outreach and for implementation. And then finally, as Karina mentioned, trying to create a portable benefits package so that platform so that they can also access things like paid time off that many of the rest of us get to enjoy. So that is the proposal here, and I hope to have my colleagues' support.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Sawant, please go ahead.
Just to add quickly to Councilmember Morales' comments, I just wanted to really appreciate the advocates for this budget amendment to get these additional dollars, and that my staff, and it was a pleasure for my staff and I to help them navigate this advocacy, and also sending the public letter to all council members that we should be doing this, and I'm glad it's here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, having worked on this piece of policy last year, I think that we are all very supportive of this effort, and I appreciate that Councilmember Morales and Karina Bull have lifted up that this is additive to money already at OLS. And I will also note that no other board this year received direct additional financial assistance for their efforts, and I think that that's a testament to us wanting to make sure that these priorities continue to get filtered out to the community so that both workers and those employer entities know rights and responsibilities. Thanks for bringing this forward. Any additional comments? Seeing none, let's move forward.
Keto Freeman, Council Central Staff, moving on here to item number 151. This is OPCD 4A1. This is a report sponsored by Councilmember Peterson from the Office of Planning and Community Development, the Office of Housing, and the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections on three things. Options for addressing the displacement monitoring data collection gap for naturally occurring affordable housing. That gap is identified in the University of California, Berkeley's Urban Displacement Project report, which informs the current displacement monitoring program. The status and outcomes for internal reporting on indicators to inform short-term and long-term displacement mitigation strategies. That's also recommended by Berkeley. And 3 recommended additional strategies to mitigate physical and economic displacement. The report would be developed in consultation with the Equitable Development Initiative Advisory Board, which the council formally created in September.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. Thank you, Keto, for that excellent summary. This is just a statement of legislative intent asking for a report in June of next year. Getting this information will provide a more comprehensive picture of our city's affordable housing stock so we can do more to prevent economic displacement. The reporting required will help to implement Resolution 31870 and Executive Order 2019-02, specifically the gap in the data for naturally occurring affordable housing. As Keto said, this gap was recognized by the recent Berkeley displacement report. So we're responding to that report by having the Office of Planning and Community Development work with Office of Housing and Seattle Department of Construction and Inspection to fill that gap so we can consider additional anti-displacement strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterson. Seeing no additional comments, thank you very much. Let's move to the next one.
All right, next item is item 152, OSC 5C1, sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. This would fund 2,600, it would add 1.3 million general fund to the Office of Sustainability and Environment for the Fresh Bucks program. This amount would fund an additional 2,600 Fresh Bucks vouchers, which may be used to purchase fruits and vegetables at a variety of retailers, including farmers markets. For reference, OSC 5B1, which was included in the chair's balancing package, would have added 1.8 million for this purpose, which is equal to 3,600 vouchers. And this amount was comprised of 1.3 million general fund and $500,000 of sweetened beverage tax proceeds that would have been transferred from the Department of Neighborhood's Healthy Food Fund. This option before you only moves forward with the general fund portion that was included in that option. It does not shift any sweetened beverage tax funding.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Yolanda. As Yolanda mentioned, this will clear 2,600 people out of the wait list of 3,664 to join the Fresh Bucks program and provide access to fresh food. The previous proposal of 1.8 million relied on that $500,000 from the sweetened beverage tax revenue. And hearing from SPD Advisory Board, we are reducing this amount to the 1.3 million so that SPD can use that 500,000 to get the Healthy Food Fund ramped up faster. So more at that $500,000 is still being used to increase access to fresh food during this time. And this funding will complement the other amendments I brought forward to improve supports for farmers markets, and so that we have many different ways that people can have access to fresh food that they need. I really can't thank you enough, Chair, for putting this forward in the package, and really appreciate everyone's work, because access to fresh food is just so important here in the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Strauss. I really appreciate your work on this. And yes, thank you for the clarification on how we are going to be using the dollars. Initially, as you saw from the summary of potential options, there was about $500,000 that was not going to be used until later in the year. And in an effort to try to get as much fresh food available out to the community as possible, we thought, could we front load that to Fresh Bucks? But it's great to hear that the sugary sweetened beverage tax community advisory board has plans now to actually front load those dollars, use it all in 2021, and start getting food out through culturally competent food partners to a more diverse community. And so we're honoring that work, as Councilmember Strauss said, and we're also making sure we're taking care of the backlog for the Fresh Bucks program. So I think both the combination of those two programs still equal the same amount of money and the same emphasis, with slightly more emphasis on culturally competent food through the Healthy Food Fund. And that's a separate line item there. So great partnership. Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. Additional items. Let's keep going.
Moving on here to agenda item number 153. This is STCI 12B1, sponsored by Councilmember Sawant. This would add $145,000 to STCI for eviction legal defense. With package A this morning, the council approved STCI 7B1, which added $460,000 for eviction legal defense. This is additive to that. If this action were to be approved, the total appropriation for eviction legal defense STCI would be $605,000.
Thank you, Councilmember Sawant.
Thank you, and I appreciate Keatle describing that, and also that it's additive to $605,000. And I was going to say that every dollar that the council approves is going to put to extremely urgent and socially beneficial use. We know that the state has a moratorium on evictions right now, but as the South Seattle Emerald reported on the 10th of this month in an article written by Erica Barnett, we have seen that evictions are still happening. Data from the Housing Justice Project of the King County Bar Association shows that, this is an example for King County, in the month of October, nearly 40 people were evicted through the court system in King County, which is up from just 8 in April. So it's clear that the corporate landlord lobby, large landlords, slumlords are now starting to assume that they can start targeting and exploiting renters yet again. And on top of that, obviously that shows that we need as much funding as possible for eviction defense to be provided. We know from overwhelming testimonials that having a trained attorney to help you makes all the difference in whether or not an eviction ends up on your record, and whether or not an eviction ends up in your record makes a huge difference for the rest of your life as a renter. Any renter, anybody who's rented for any length of time would know exactly what all of that means. But in addition to all of that, we're now seeing, and this is an article from Crosscut, which is really important, which talks about how the corporate landlord lobby is now starting to pressure the state government and the governor to really water down the moratorium, because the moratorium has to be updated. We don't think the pandemic is going to end anytime soon. We've just seen a new spike here. And so now we are seeing a push from landlord lobby to say that, well, there's going to be all kinds of conditions to prove why you can't pay rent. And we see from all kinds of data going back decades that actually there is very little substance to this mythology that ordinary people, poor people, cash-strapped and working class people end up abusing the services or benefits. Actually, there's very little data to show that. But in addition to all of the data that we have from decades together, we also have testimonials from tenant rights advocates who are very clear from all the anecdotal evidence they've seen that willful non-payment is not a widespread problem, and they are convinced, and as am I, and as the People's Budget is, that requiring proof of hardship cannot be administered easily by whether it's a municipal or state government, and also it would create massive problems and a lot of people would fall through the cracks. So we're heading into a very difficult situation. Even more difficult than this year is going to be next year. And so all the resources we have, public resources for eviction defense, will come in good stead.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. I'm seeing no additional hands, and thank you for the comments about the additional money that's in the budget. We have doubled the program in the first budget, and now we are adding an additional position here as well. It's going from, I think, 2 to 5 positions around that. So very excited to make sure that we support this effort as we look at the wave of potential evictions on the horizon if we don't mitigate it some other way. Let's keep going.
All right, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Greg Doss, Central Staff, here to talk about item 154, which is SPD 015. SPD 015C001, and this particular item will transfer $450,000 general fund from the Seattle Police Department to the Human Services Department to fund an existing contract for 5 mental health professionals who are currently paired up with SPD officers as part of the crisis response team. The action would only transfer the contract and would also in a separate action would add $1 million in funding to HSD to support other different kinds of contracted mental health outreach workers and impose 2 provisos. So this is an action that the committee has seen before, the movement of the mental health providers that are on SPD's crisis response team, actually not the providers themselves, but just the contract to HSD. The change in this item is that the $1 million before had been going to the CRT. And in this particular version, 1 million is added to HSD to support the creation or expansion of neighborhood-based teams of mental health, medical, and substance abuse disorder professionals. These professionals would respond to individuals experiencing chronic and acute behavioral health issues, particularly people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And they would be offered the services through a program that is similar to the DESC's Homeless Outreach, Stabilization, and Transition Team, HOST. There are two provisos that go along with this action. One is that $500,000 may not be spent of the Seattle Police Department's budget until SPD provides a report that contains an analysis and recommendations on a process that would allow mental health providers to respond without officers to 911 calls that identify persons in crisis or suffering from mental health related issues. And then the other proviso is one that restricts the $450,000 that would be spent for the mental health provider contract for SPD, so that it may only be used for the crisis response unit. And it is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Strauss, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Greg. As Greg mentioned, this amendment does not change the current staffing level of the crisis response team in Seattle Police Department. And when I discussed this with all of you colleagues earlier in the budget process, we looked at expanding the crisis response team. What we heard from many different types of people is that investing these mental health professional dollars upstream will be more important than being responsive to 911. So this amendment keeps the crisis response team whole. It also adds $1 million to support mental health outreach response programs, such as the HOST team that Greg discussed. The HOST team's expansion would allow for mental health outreach workers to be distributed geographically throughout the city to respond in real time to crisis situations that do not require law enforcement, as well as they will be able to respond without 911 to people in our communities. And investing mental health resources upstream will decrease the number of behavioral health 911 calls placed. These outreach workers or first responders, however you want to categorize them, as I said, will be geographically distributed to ensure that all districts in the city have these important mental health professionals in their neighborhood. Scaling up mental health oriented approaches to responding to individuals in crisis on our streets is an important part of ensuring public safety for all of our community members. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Greg.
Excellent. Thank you. Additional questions? Okay, I know we've heard from a handful of folks who work in the service provider world. They appreciate this, so thank you for bringing that forward. Next item.
All right, the next item is number 155, which is SPD 116B001, and it's sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. This council budget action would impose a proviso that restricts SPD from spending $550,000 until it provides a report that meets the requirements of Resolution 31962 regarding the Harbor Patrol and functions that might be transferred to the Seattle Fire Department. So by way of background, Resolution 31962 was passed by the council last summer, and in it there was a request for a report on what kind of non-law enforcement functions might be transferred from SPD to SFD. And this particular action is one that the council has seen before. The only difference with this option is that there are some specific requests around this report that are new. But they really just go to a level of detail that is consistent with the original request. So with that, as I said, it's sponsored by Councilmember Strauss.
Excellent. Councilmember Strauss, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Greg. As we know, earlier this year, Council passed Resolution 31962, which asked SPD to report on a number of things, including an analysis of Harbor Patrol things that could be transferred out of SPD and into the fire department. I know that with so many different things going on, I had requested, and maybe I didn't communicate clearly enough, that I would like this proviso to also look at if these functions could be transferred into the fire department or into the community safety and communications department. I know that my team has worked with Ally to understand that that change could happen in January when we officially adopt these slides. I would like to make sure that this correction is made during this budget process to reduce confusion possible.
Councilmember Strauss, I think that, thank you for flagging that. I'm guessing Ally will say, we will pull this item, and then if you have a verbal amendment that's easy to understand, we'd like to see that in writing as well. So if your team's already got something in writing, to make sure to share that with Ally and crew. That way we can have something that we can visually show folks. But you can make a verbal amendment. My preference is that that verbal amendment is also reflected in writing. Is that process-wise correct, Ally?
Yeah, that is process-wise correct. And I just want to clarify, because I did say you could wait until until the council adopts the slides at the beginning of the year, because I thought it was a slide. So that was my bad advice, because it is actually a proviso. So, but process-wise, it would be correct when we get to the end of Group B. You'll want to pull it, and then can make a verbal amendment, and I'll work with your team to get something ready here.
Great. And Councilmember Herbold, you are off of mute, just in case.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. I'll just finish out my comments here, if that's all right, Chair, so that I don't have to write. So while the resolution deadline for that report was in October, SPD indicated that it would not be able to respond in that time. So instead would include this conversation as part of that interdepartmental team process. So this proviso restricts $550,000 of Harbor Patrol's 2021 budget, which is about 1 month of operating dollars, pending the receipt of this report by May 24th, 2021. So it ensures that there's flexibility. This should ensure that we don't delay in getting the information, which is valuable in informing future policy choices about Harbor Patrol. I was glad to work with Councilmember Herbold on this as she helped include several specific questions to the proviso after Form Bs were submitted. Which is why it's listed in this section. Again, just for the general population who are watching right now, Harbor Patrol is an important function in our water-based city, and there are a number of different functions within Harbor Patrol that are memorialized through memorandums of understanding rather than through code. And it's important for us to understand which functions of the department of that Harbor Patrol are strictly law enforcement and which are civilian based. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Councilmember Herbold.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. Let's move on to the next item.
All right, the next item is number 156, which is SPD 021A001. That is sponsored by you, Madam Chair. It is a statement of legislative intent that would require that SPD submit to the council a report that provides recommendations on demilitarizing the police force. The report should focus on enacting new policies that would include the limitation of purchasing of assault rifles, high caliber munitions, armored vehicles, and armored vehicles that would be used by tactical units. Assessing the use, style, and display of tactical body armor during demonstrations, training programs that would focus officer mindset on citizen service and protection, assessing additional uniform options for minimizing the visibility of weapons and equipment while recognizing employee well-being and safety, and prioritizing citizen safety and well-being over protection of property.
Thank you very much, Greg. Colleagues, this is something that we've talked about for a number of years. We've heard anecdotally stories of individual officers who have been showing up at recent protests, especially showing up to protests in support of Black lives, who they themselves have said, you know, why am I showing up in otherwise military outfits, with a response that would indicate that they're ready to go to battle instead of showing up in, you know, their bike uniform or something like that. That is a little less intimidating. Also, we have heard directly from the Inspector General and the Office of Police Accountability that often the situations have been escalated by the presence of police and the type of equipment that they have, I think, can also escalate the situation when really what we want to do is de-escalate. I've also had a conversation directly with the chief about this, and I think that there is potentially some shared interest in evaluating the type of equipment that is currently being purchased. I would very much like to limit the supply line items from being able to be used for items like this. We are currently undergoing a review process of how we use and purchase our crowd control weapons. And I think until that happens, this is a interim step to make sure that we are looking across the board about how we can create a more approachable force that is not militarized, that is not spending millions of dollars on things like tanks and other equipment. So appreciate that there's some shared interest there, both in terms of the frontline officers and potentially within the department as well as within the community. And with that, would encourage us to all think about the ways in which this type of report could be helpful in future efforts as well. Councilmember Herbold, anything else to add to that?
Sure. I just want to thank you for identifying this issue and sharing that there is some alignment from the police chief on our goals here. Appreciate knowing that.
Thank you very much. Let's move to the next item.
Item is 157, and it's SPL 1B1. It's now sponsored by Councilmember Lewis, and it is a slide that requests that the library open curbside pickup and return at all branches or do in-branch service at 25% capacity.
Very excited about this, Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you so much, Asha, for queuing that up. We've talked about this a couple of times already during the deliberations over the budget. Since the last time we discussed it, we've incorporated feedback from the library as well as feedback from the unions who represent employees in the library to make sure that we are being cognizant of how to do this in a way that is safe and recognizing the limitations of COVID and the governor's orders. Now more than ever, as we are facing another wave of those orders. I do think it is important in times of really strong adversity like this, where folks are needing to sequester at home, to have at their access the full resources of the Seattle library system, particularly for people who have difficulty accessing purely digital or purely remote collections. I think that there's a way to go even further and beyond what we have done, which is commendable in terms of allowing some branches to have curbside pickup. But I think as we confront this, we should follow the lead of some other regional library systems, including King County, which has had a very robust process at allowing more access to their physical collections and allowing it in more branches. So that is essentially what this is requesting, and I look forward to it being incorporated in the budget.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you bringing this forward. Okay, let's keep going.
I'm Dan Eder, Interim Director of Council Central Staff. Item 158 is SPR 600A1. It is sponsored by Councilmember Lewis. This budget action would add approximately $2.4 million of one-time general fund to the 2021 budget for the purpose of implementing a Clean Cities initiative. This action would add funding to the budgets of Seattle Parks and Recreation, the Seattle Department of Transportation, Seattle Public Utilities, and the Office of Economic Development for a 4-month surge in a variety of cleanup and related activities. A separate budget action, BLG 2B3, is item number 160 later in this group of budget actions on your agenda. That separate budget action would also amend the third quarter supplemental to add $720,000 for the same purpose in 2020. The cumulative funding in the two related council budget actions totals $3.1 million across the 2 years, 2020 and 2021. Central staff analysts and I are standing by if there are questions about the types of activities and the level of funding that the budget actions together would provide in each of the affected departments.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Lewis. I will turn it back over to you, and thanks again for bringing this forward.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And if there are technical questions, I'll defer to Dan, though I do have a spreadsheet at my disposal of the specific breakdown of department and service. As I go out and do a lot of these walkthroughs of unsanctioned encampments, and I know this has been echoed by other members of the council here as well, Councilmember Morales in particular. One thing I hear a lot from folks who are living unhoused in unsanctioned encampments is the desire for a more regular and efficient removal of garbage and trash from a lot of these encampment sites. And I know that that's an area of mutual interest with businesses that are near unsanctioned encampments, as well as residents of nearby buildings who are living housed. So this goes a long way towards demonstrating how we can respond and effectively remove the garbage and waste that's associated with really how any human being lives, but what we take for granted by having the dependable service that we get by being housed and by having a regular garbage pickup. So this incorporates some things that have been discussed extensively and that other council members have led on throughout the budget process, particularly Councilmember Morales and the expansion of the Purple Bag program, which is incorporated into this. So I think it really does represent a good effort to come together on this issue to mitigate the impacts that we're seeing from a lot of unsanctioned encampments and really provide the service that a lot of us take for granted and that we should be extending to everybody in the city.
Thank you so much. Are there any additional comments on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, please go ahead, Councilmember Juarez.
Thank you. As you know, last week I had raised concerns about, or actually wanted to pursue the Clean Cities Initiative. I know that the executive was originally asking, I think, for 5.6. I think this is a good place to land and a good beginning because, again, I want to stress that increasing the trash pickup to proactively increase cleaning in parks and open spaces, to help business districts manage issues of trash accumulation while working to preserve livelihoods is really important. I think I shared this sentiment last week as well, that I believe that two sides of the equation are, on one side is reaching out for people on the ground, providing services and directing people and navigating them to shelter and services. And the other side of the equation is picking up the piles and piles of trash and all the other issues that we see in our parks and our green spaces. And also I had an opportunity, which I'm sure you all did as well, to look at the Clean City route analysis and the neighborhoods that they're first going to be looking at in South Seattle, Georgetown, Little Saigon, Capitol Hill, Ballard, University District, Aurora, and Lake City. And so I think this is a really good start looking at the heat map where we need it most. And I just really want to commend Superintendent Agare of Parks because we've worked very closely with him and particularly their staff. In light of COVID, I believe that they have not had to lay off one person, maybe one person. And in fact, their staff has been so flexible and so good to be first in the front lines of taking their regular job and being deployed to do other jobs, mainly laser focused on cleaning up the trash and beyond hand washing stations, beyond purple bags. I'm talking, couches, TVs, grills, mattresses, tents, needles. So I'm really thankful, and I want to thank Councilmember Lewis for bringing this forward. I think this is really needed, and I'm hoping that we can move forward on this, and this is a starting point, that we move hand in hand with what we passed earlier and giving our, what I'm calling our North End navigators and South End navigators on the ground to work hand in hand with parks, hopefully SPU, in cleaning up all of these open spaces, public spaces, green spaces, and parks. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Juarez. Any additional comments? Councilmember Morales, please go ahead.
Thank you. I am excited that we will be, seeing more trash pickup, as everybody knows, in every part of the city. that is certainly something that our neighborhood business districts could benefit from, our residential areas could benefit from. So I'm glad to see that happening. I just want to state for the record that our office will be paying close attention to how this actually rolls out. It's our understanding that there are two former navigation team members that are already doing some of the works in parks, and these are the folks who were responsible for determining whether something qualified or merited an obstruction citing so that a sweep could happen. So I on the one hand am happy that this is moving forward because everybody can see clearly that we need additional trash pickup throughout the city. And do want to say that we will be very interested to see how this unfolds. And my hope is that this is a good faith effort on everyone's part to ensure that our homeless neighbors don't get caught up in some of the activity that used to be happening through this work.
Thank you very much. Well said. And good reminder that this is additive. This is a surge capacity, especially in the winter months as we see more folks who are facing homelessness and housing instability. This would be additive to that purple bag program, as you mentioned, and appreciate the mayor's office in working with council members, especially Councilmember Lewis is the champion of this. I understand that yes, the original request was north of 5 million, but that they scaled it down to 3.12. So we are really meeting them at the $3.1 million figure here and hoping, as the council members have noted, that we continue to see holistic services offered in addition to that garbage cleanup, which we know is so critical. And lastly, thank you all. Councilmember Juarez mentioned this early last week. Councilmember Morales had an additional Form C on this. So I think there's a lot of shared interest in this council and partnering to make sure that we are providing these public health services to our community at large. Excited to see this. And let's move on.
Good afternoon, council members. Brian Goodnight, Council Central staff. Item 159 is budget action SPU 4C1, which would provide $100,000 of general fund to Seattle Public Utilities to develop and implement a publicly accessible sink program. This makes minor revisions to an item that was included in the chair's balancing package discussed last week, and it's for the same amount. The description now references that the sink program should be based upon the model developed by the Clean Hands Collective, and it also specifies that up to 5% of the funds may be used for a survey to identify high area needs for sink placement. And this item is sponsored by Councilmember Morales.
Councilmember Morales.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Brian. As he said, this is modeled here on a design that was created by Clean Hands Collective. These things are currently deployed near homeless services up in the North End. And the idea here is to create a cost-effective sinks. These are ADA compliant. They hook up to city water and they filter into a rain garden. So right now we have 15 hand washing stations across the entire city. With this additional funding, we'll be able to create a network of street sinks and be able to provide public hand washing stations throughout the city with a total, I believe, of about 78 sinks citywide. So really excited to be able to do this and want to thank Clean Hands Collective, Real Change, and all the folks who've been advocating for every opportunity to create better hygiene opportunities for our folks throughout the city.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Morales. I'm really glad that clarification was able to get included in this item and look forward to those creative solutions across our city. Last item, Lisa Kay.
Okay, item 160, BLG 002-B-003 recommends approval and passage of the third quarter supplemental, and it is sponsored by the Budget Committee. This revised version only makes 3 additional amendments beyond those that were identified in the chair's balancing package. It would provide $100,000 for the mayor's community safety work group that's associated with Equitable Communities Initiative and would cut the remaining $400,000 for 2020. However, additional funding would be available in 2021 from the $30 million that's appropriated for the Equitable Communities Initiative. The second change would be to cut $4.1 million from FAS in one-time savings from the city's contracts with King County for jail services and public defense. And that would provide greater additional fund balance to support the council's priorities in the 2021 budget. Finally, the third change would add $720,000 to the 4 departments mentioned in the previous items to start implementing the proposed Clean Cities Initiative relative to items 157 and 158, as you heard before. So those 4 departments are Parks and Recreation, SDOT, Public Utilities, and Office of Economic Development.
Thank you very much. And folks who might not know this, Lisa Kay has been very busy behind the scenes working on Q3, which is its own endeavor as we continue to work on calendar year 2021. So thank you very much, Lisa, for all of that work. Okay, colleagues, we do have one item that was listed on your agenda. My understanding is that the sponsor is interested in pulling item number 161. Councilmember Strauss, would you like to comment on that? Happy to have central staff comment on it as well if you'd like.
Yeah, here I thought my camera had been on this entire time. I must have turned it off for another reason. So happy to pull this back. It's my understanding that OIR has found some cost savings from other aspects of their portfolio to be able to fully fund our AWC dues without paying dues in full. We don't have a seat at the table for either the Association of Washington Cities or the National League of Cities. So this is an important $57,000, and I'm grateful that OIR has been able to find this capacity elsewhere. So pulling this amendment back, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. And confirming what you have already said, the additional capacity that they have found will not impact programs or services, will not impact our efforts to be represented in Olympia and nationally. And I understand that is coming from a vacant position that they're able to carry forward underspend dollars. So thank you for all your work on that. And we will remove item 161 from our package of consent amendment items from Form B. So colleagues, that is the summary. Thank you very much to all of you for putting these items forward and to central staff for walking us through this. At this point, I'm going to remind us of the process. We are able to pull in any individual item that you think requires additional discussion or debate to be voted on individually. Once we have pulled those items, we will then go back and consider the Group B as a whole package. As a reminder, you do not have to pull an item. If you want to speak to it more than you already have, you are welcome to do that before we consider final vote on Group B. So we're going to go ahead and allow council members to identify any item that they would like to request be pulled out for a separate vote on the consent item package. And I'm going to give you an example. Item 136 is an item that we put forward. It was an inadvertent effort on our part, error on our part, accidentally uploaded from our end the wrong form. I want to make sure that the language that we've been talking with stakeholders about is reflected in the final document here. So in an effort to make sure that we are including the document that we've talked with about to stakeholders about the process for the task force being aligned and not duplicative of other efforts such as participatory budgeting and making sure that we're consistent with our conversations with those stakeholders. Want to make sure that we get that right document uploaded there, but it will not change the dollars amount. Lisa spoke to that as well as I did earlier, making sure that both in Q3's budget and in next year's budget, there is also dollars available up to $500,000 to be able to be used for the early contracting to help facilitate the discussion. So I will be pulling 136 to move forward a substitute with that minor technical change. Any additional items folks would like to pull? Council President, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that item 127 BLG 042 A001 be removed for an individual vote. You are muted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Council President is moving item 127 BLG 042 A001 for individual vote. Is there another item that anybody would like to remove? Councilmember Herpel.
Thank you. I would like to move that agenda item 143, statement of legislative intent, law -2-A-1 be removed for an individual vote.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Herbold is moving item number 143, law -002 A001 be pulled for individual vote. additional comments? I'm sorry, additional hands. I see Councilmember Strauss. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would like to move item 155 SPD 016B001, the proviso on harbor patrol, for individual vote so that I may make a voice amendment. Thank you.
That sounds great. Thank you, Councilmember Strauss. 155 SPD 016B001. And also with your verbal amendment, if you have something that you're going to read, if you can share it with myself and Allie, that would be very helpful as well. Thank you very much. Additional items. Councilmember Peterson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. As I mentioned prematurely earlier today, I'd like to move to have an individual vote on item 141, which is CBA HOM 021-A-001.
Make sure I got that correct. Item number 141, which is HOM 021A001. Thank you very much, Councilmember. I feel like I'm in an auction. Anything else? Okay, I am not seeing any additional hands at this point. So I'm going to summarize the items that I see and concur with our team from Central Staff and Patty that we have this correct. Number 127, number 136, 143, 155, and 141. I'm going to read those either council budget action items, our CBA numbers, or our statement of legislative intent numbers, just for the record here, so that people have both the item number and the correct association in our draft budget here. So items 127 is BLG 042A001, item 136 FG 003B001, item 141 HOM 021A001, item 143 LAW-002A001, and lastly, item 155 on our agenda is SPD 016B001. Are there any additional council members that would like to remove any item on today's Group B consent amendment package? All right, folks, this seems doable. Let's begin. Allie, I think that what would be helpful is if you could, I think alphanumeric order here, we're going to read again the summary of the title here. We don't have to go in too much in depth. I'll turn it over to the person who has pulled the item. You may have to remind me as we go through this, but I think I got it. And then we will go to the sponsor of the item. And then we will take a vote to consider its inclusion in our consent amendment package. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Allie.
So the first item that was removed from, let's see here. The items were removed from the package. I just want to clarify with the chair, before we move to the individual items, I think you want to move the rest, the package as amended and vote on that package.
That sounds great. I'm seeing thumbs up from our colleagues. Let me do that. So before we get to item D3A on the agenda, I'm going to go ahead and move D3. Are there any additional requests to move any other items? Seeing none, is there any additional comments on the consent package? Seeing no additional comments, will the clerk please call the roll of the adoption of consent amendment package in Group B?
Lewis.
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Sawant.
Yes.
Peterson.
Yes.
Juarez.
Aye.
Strauss.
Yes.
Herbold.
Yes.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Chair Mosqueda.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. With the removal of the items that were listed by Central Staff, the motion does carry and the amended consent package is approved. Thank you very much. Now let's go ahead and move into items D3A, which are items removed from the consent package. We're going to consider these items again in alphanumeric order. We're going to be reminded if there is a substitute. Allie and the central staff team, along with the clerk's office, will help us remember if there is certain scripts that we need to stick to. If you do have a substitute item, after the motion to substitute is second, I will recognize the central staff to walk us through both the substitute item and the agenda being substituted, and then I'll recognize the sponsor to address it. I am going to also recognize the individual who has pulled it in case they have any additional comments to add before we turn it over to the sponsors. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So central staff, thank you very much, Allie. Let's go to the first item on the removed package from voting group B.
Okay. So the first item removed is item 127, BLG 42A1. This would pass Council Bill 119951 to implement a $20 increase to the STBD vehicle license fee and add $3.6 million to the Department of Transportation for bridge maintenance programs. Council President Gonzalez made the motion to remove this item that is sponsored by Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you very much. Council President Gonzalez, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Mosqueda. I pulled this item number 127, in order to place a substitute bill before the City Council for consideration of adoption, again, as a substitute to the originally proposed council budget action. So I'm happy to move that substitute if that's the appropriate thing to do now, but I think I can't move the substitute until there's been an actual motion to consider the underlying CBA and then a call for comments, and then I can discuss my my substitute. So I'm happy to sort of punt on those procedural issues and talk about why I'm making the substitute first. But I think procedurally, Allie's probably going to tell us that I can't even talk about the substitute without having
get the procedural stuff out of the way.
Procedural stuff out of the way.
I think, oh, sorry.
That's okay. I think if this is correct, let me know. I move. Go ahead, Allie.
So I think what you would like to do here is you'd like to move the item that's on the agenda, move approval of BLG 042A001. And then after that is seconded, Council President Gonzalez can move her substitute. You can ask central staff to explain the original item and the substitute version, have some discussion before taking a vote on the motion to substitute. Because again, if you vote yes on the motion to substitute, you are taking out the original item for consideration.
Okay, great. So to put it in front of us, I move approval of Council Bill BLG 042A001 as included in voting group B consent package. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve Council Bill BLG 042A001. Are there any comments or amendments? Council President Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. We're going to get through these procedures, I promise. Thank you, Chair. I move to substitute BLG 042B001 in place of BLG 042A001.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Before we take a vote that would move to substitute this, is there additional comments? Council President, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think I'm going to let Allie or whomever else is appropriate from central staff explain the difference between the original and the substitute, and then I'm happy to make comments about my substitute version.
Thank you, Council President. I'm going to ask my colleague Calvin Chow to describe the two amendments, and he may provide some context for the proposal generally. Calvin, if you're available.
Good afternoon, council members. Calvin Chow with Council Central Staff. The original underlying proposal, BLG 042A001, increases our existing $20 vehicle license fee to a $40 vehicle license fee. And then it directs those resources for 2021 to bridge maintenance programs. The proposed substitute, BLG 042B001, would enact similar legislation, but would not direct where those resources would go at this time. It would park those appropriations in Finance General and request that there be a spending plan being developed by SDOT for presentation to council for a future budget action. If it is useful, I have a graphic prepared to just try to highlight how this is different from the transit funding dollars. That may or may not be useful to you, but I did prepare that in case that helps put this into some context.
Please, I think that would be fine, Calvin.
Patty, could you please put up that graphic, please? Or if not, I can. Oh, great, thank you. So, council members, this graphic in front of you shows the different revenue options that are available to transportation benefit districts. And I wanted to just highlight what we're talking about here is in item H here. So you can see that there are some revenue options that council can take with transportation benefit districts. And we have had in place since 2010 a $20 vehicle license fee that's shown in item G. And that has funded basic transportation maintenance for since 2010. State law allows us to increase that to $40 total, as long as that original fee has been in place for 24 months. So since we've had that for 10 years, we could increase that to $40. And that is a proposal in front of us with BLG 042. Separately, there is also impact fees that the Transportation Benefit District could consider as a councilmatic option, but all the other revenue options are voter approved, and those are the ones at the very top. And you'll see that items A and B were the 2014 transit measure. Item C, which we talked about earlier today, is the new 1.15% sales tax that goes in place in 2021. And then there are some additional voter approved revenue options. But I think it's important for us to understand they're sort of two distinct funding sources with different authorities behind them. The one for BLG 042 is councilmanic, does not have to go to the voters, and would essentially be doubling the existing $20 VLF to $40.
Thank you very much, Calvin. Council President, I'm going to turn it back over to you for comments, and then I will turn it to the sponsor of the original sponsor on this item for our continued discussion. Council President.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Calvin, for that that handy graph. Really appreciate that. It gives a lot of clarity to something that is rather clunky, if you will, in terms of how the revenue sources work. So I appreciate that. So colleagues, at present time, as you just heard Calvin say, that the Seattle Transportation Benefit District is funded via a $20 vehicle license fee that has been imposed legislatively in perpetuity since 2010. In addition to that, there is a voter approved $60 additive fee in addition to a 0.1% sales tax. Beginning in January 2021, the city will no longer collect the $60 vehicle licensing fee following the voters' overwhelming approval of Proposition 1, which discontinued the vehicle licensing fee in lieu of an increase of the transit sales tax to 0.15%. Under RCW 36.73, the city has the authority to immediately and legislatively impose a vehicle licensing fee of up to a total maximum of $40. I support a $20 increase to the vehicle licensing fee because I believe it is necessary to support the ongoing operations of our city's transit services and the maintenance of our transportation infrastructure and networks. Because of the expiration of the previous STBD ballot measure, Seattle's vehicle owners will actually see a $60 decrease to their vehicle licensing fee for all car tab renewals after January 1st, 2021. And despite the increased sales tax, the city stands to collect over $10 million less for the STBD annually than under the previous 2014 ballot measure. If approved, this council budget action will still result in Seattle residents experiencing a $40 decrease to their total annual vehicle licensing fee payments. If approved, this budget action will still result in STBD having less revenue to expend annually in 2021 to 2026 than it did under the expiring 6-year ballot measure. I appreciate deeply the work and commitment of council members Peterson, Herbold, and Lewis to bring this proposal forward, and I do not disagree with or oppose their policy objectives. There is certainly no shortage of need in our transportation benefit district to support additional transit hours, bike and pedestrian infrastructure, and bridge maintenance. I do feel, however, that more work and stakeholder engagement must be done before we can decide how to appropriate this additional revenue. The substitute budget action proposes that the anticipated $3.6 million in 2021 revenue be held under a proviso in Finance General until the city, led by SDOT, has engaged in a thorough stakeholder engagement process that can inform a spending plan to prioritize the appropriation of these funds. The proposal submitted by council members Peterson, Herbold, and Lewis is prescriptive by requiring that the $3.6 million collected in 2021, which is the total amount that can be collected in 2021, be spent only on bridge maintenance. It additionally would require that in the outward years, the city of Seattle spend the fully collected $7.2 million per year on only bridge maintenance. In contrast, my substitute budget action is not prescriptive. In other words, if adopted by the council, my budget action does not prohibit the use of any of this revenue for bridge maintenance. Rather, my substitute budget action parks this revenue in Finance General and requires that the city of Seattle engage in a meaningful stakeholder process that will guide SDOT's future expenditures within the lawful boundaries of the STBD and existing city and state law. Some may argue that they're not comfortable imposing a tax without a defined spending plan in place. I have two responses to that argument or concern. First, while opponents have used that reasoning to try to defeat tax proposals in the past, this is not a new tax. The existing $20 vehicle licensing fee is a well-established fee that is guided by state and city statutes that limit and direct how this revenue may be spent. RCW 36.73, which authorizes transportation benefit districts, sets the parameters for how these revenues can be spent and dictates that they must be dedicated to transportation uses while giving local jurisdictions discretion over how to best prioritize spending. So I believe that those statutory parameters predefines the contours of our spending plan, and what is at issue here is how to prioritize the spending of these dollars within those lawful boundaries. I believe it's critical we give valued stakeholders and community members the opportunity to advise the city on how to prioritize the use of these dollars in the context of our broader investments in the Seattle Transportation Benefit District, transit services, and our transportation infrastructure. Second, if council members share the concern that it would be imprudent to pass this vehicle licensing fee without a spending plan in place now, the answer is not to jam this fee and spending plan through the last phase of our budget process. Rather, I believe the prudent and reasonable solution to that concern would be to pull this proposed council bill action altogether and instead establish a stakeholder process, conduct the engagement, receive recommendations, and deliberate the spending plan and the fee at the same time with the benefit of stakeholder and taxpayer input into how these additional dollars can be utilized to support authorized uses, including bridge maintenance. So again, the only difference between my proposal and the proposal made by council members Peterson, Herbold, and Lewis is really related to what the stakeholder engagement process should look like in order to guide our decision-making and the department's decision-making around how these dollars should be expended. And it is absolutely possible that that engagement process and that stakeholder process will conclude that a portion of the dollars collected by the vehicle license fee should be spent on bridge maintenance. But I do think it's important for us to allow for that process to unfold. My preference here would be for us to pass the vehicle license fee legislation now and to allow for the stakeholder process to occur. I did have a conversation with Director Sam Zimbabwe early this morning via email. He did indicate that he would want to see perhaps a shorter stakeholder engagement process for the department's ability to have greater certainty around operationalizing any sort of spending plan. And so my hope is that before Monday, if there is an amendment that needs to be made here, we'll be able to work with Council Central staff and the department to identify that small technical change to a timeline related to the stakeholder engagement process and the outside date of when council would consider adoption of a spending plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Council President. Appreciate you walking us through that explanation of the substitute. And I will turn it over to Councilmember Peterson as the original sponsor of this item. I have Councilmember Juarez in the queue, and if there's others, please do let me know. Councilmember Swan, I'll add you in. Thank you very much. Councilmember Peterson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda, and thank you, Council President. That was a really fair and well said response to this issue and to your substitute. And I want to thank Council Members Herbold and Lewis as well for teaming up on this. Seattle is defined by its waterways and ravines, so we rely on our aging bridges to connect us and keep our economy moving by safely carrying multiple modes of travel. When there is no bridge, there are no transportation choices. I toured the cracked and closed West Seattle Bridge yesterday. I was inside the bridge. The maintenance needs are tremendous there, and it really is eye-opening experience when we consider all the other bridges that connect our city. Maintaining our bridges takes money and experts, not more process or lobbying at City Hall. We have been discussing for months the need for more bridge maintenance throughout our city ever since the West Seattle High Bridge cracked and closed. And our city auditor started work on a citywide bridge assessment, which we received several weeks ago, showing that our bridges throughout the city are aging, in disrepair, need more maintenance dollars now. We've been discussing for months the need to overturn I-976 because the vehicle licensees are vital to fund transportation projects and programs as authorized by state law. And as Council President pointed out, folks are paying $80 now and it will drop to $20. So this underlying legislation would take it to $40. So we can do all we can for transportation next year. And as Calvin pointed out, we are able to do this councilmanically on our own. We all support transit, bridges support transit. As we await a vaccine for COVID and transit ridership to recover after plummeting sharply this year during the pandemic, the bridge audit that we've received concludes we have an urgent need today to increase maintenance of our bridge infrastructure. So the budget Form C that accompanies the council bill enables us to make a larger down payment toward this infrastructure priority and focus it on our frequent transit network. And this is just for 2021, so it's not prescriptive beyond 2021. Despite the sharp loss of transit ridership, including bus ridership this year due to the pandemic that is spiking again, I know we are optimistic about the future and we want to make sure our economy recovers and transit ridership along with it. So this bill is just about $3.6 million for bridge maintenance just for next year. There are many more dollars available for transit service hours in 2021 due to an over $23 million reserve left over from the expiring STBD, 23 million versus the 3.6 million we're trying to add to bridge maintenance. That's in addition to the dollars overwhelmingly approved by voters this past November. So as part of the future meetings of our Transportation and Utilities Committee, working with SDOT, Transit Advisory Board, Move Seattle Levy Oversight Committee, Transportation Equity Work Group, labor unions, other stakeholders, we're already planning to have a process for those much larger sums of money. The amount for bridge maintenance in the balancing package is welcome, but falls short. Approving the dollars for bridge maintenance now is important to enable SDOT to recruit additional inspectors and engineers now. I don't believe we need many more months of Seattle process to determine whether our bridges are breaking or to determine how to spend just $3.6 million when we're literally passing a $6.5 billion budget this Monday. So I would urge my colleagues to support the original Form C. So for just 2021, we can have this additional increment for bridge maintenance. So in short, buses need bridges too. Our measure focuses these dollars on the frequent transit network. We cannot ignore the bridge audit, and transit funding will increase as transit demand increases. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Juarez, you are next in the queue.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank our friends at TCC, the Transportation Choices Coalition, and the 8 other signatories. And the letter that they had sent to council dated November 17th, which was yesterday. And I want to thank Councilmember Peterson in his timely response to the concerns raised by TCC and the other 8, as I said, signatories. Councilmember Peterson raised 8 important points to respond to the community concerns that were raised. And without going into detail, because Councilmember Peterson can speak for himself, but from what I've read and what I've looked at, this is $3.6 million for the year 2021. I do have faith in the bridge audit. And I just wanted to share 2 other major points. First being that I think it's important to note that the VLF can be used for a variety of transportation projects, including infrastructure maintenance and capital improvements. But before I get there, I want to say something in general because TCC has been such a good partner in other areas. I'm a member of the Puget Sound Regional Council Transportation Committee and also a member of Sound Transit. And I want to share my meeting with Mr. Terry White, the new GM at Metro. Starting with Puget Sound Regional Council, they are working on their regional equity strategy. A lot of stakeholder involvement and meetings about, and TCC was able to provide comments there as well. Their progress report on their work to support BIPOC and other marginalized communities, looking at opportunity maps, exclusionary zoning, redlining, mortgage lending, all of these practices, these institutionalized racist practices that prevented and excluded targeted BIPOC communities from transportation, wealth, equity, and access. In our discussions with Mr. White, the new GM at Metro, they are also doing an equity analysis. So the PSRC is doing an equity strategy. Metro is doing their equity analysis, again, with stakeholder groups, with their mobility framework, with a cabinet, an equity cabinet of 23 members, many which are part of TCC and all these other groups that have signed on to the letter. Not only discussing about bus routes and realignment in bus routes and emphasis in South Seattle, but how we look at transportation and shifting resources to the South End. As a member of Sound Transit, I'll tell you what my main concern is that every meeting, whether it's the full board meeting or the subcommittee meetings, a perennial topic all the time is the bridges, particularly West Seattle and Ballard, in light of the fact that we're hoping that we get light rail to West Seattle in 2030 and we get light rail to Ballard in 2035. So I really appreciate what Council President Gonzalez said, but I think the times are a little bit different about having a 6-month period for stakeholder when we know the emergent factor now is we have a bridge that's not working. And my concern is this, and I learned this from Deshaun from Metro. Thank you, Deshaun. I told him that I would use this sentence because I think it sums it up for me, that in looking at these equity strategies, these equity plans, this equity analysis, I think we already kind of know we have a bridge that's down and we have other bridges that we need to look at, that we have to be value-driven and data-informed. So Metro, PSRC, the Transportation Committee, and Sound Transit are all discussing and implementing mobility plans, bus service, making sure that we're looking at those areas that need it the most, and a primary emphasis on equity. So all of those voices are being heard in these 3 different areas, regionally and citywide, for bus services, bus routes, and many of the issues that TCC shared in their letter. So I'm not inclined to support Council President's substitute. However, I think she offered an excellent solution to, if it isn't 6 months, perhaps 3 months. That I'm more inclined to support the substitute with a shorter timeline in light of the exigent circumstances of basically one of our main bridges, West Seattle Bridge, being down, and the other 4 bridges that the audit looked at. So for me, I can't support the substitute in its current form, but I'm certainly open to supporting the substitute if we went from 6 to 3 months. Because again, we have to emphasize this is $3.6 million for 2021 during COVID, West Seattle Bridge down. That's the reason why we had the audit done, and also looking at the Ballard Bridge as well. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Juarez. Councilmember Sawant.
Thank you. I will be supporting the substitution presented by Council President Gonzalez. Community organizations like the Transit Riders Union have advocated for the opportunity to weigh in on how this funding will be used, and this substitution will give them the time to do so. I will mention after this vote, I intend to move a second substitution, which my office sent to you all over email last night, to change the revenue source of this funding. My amendment will not comment on how the fund should be used, but would only change the funding source, increasing progressive business taxes, big business taxes, rather than increasing the deeply regressive car tap fees. So again, I will vote yes on the substitution and make that motion after this vote is decided.
Thank you. Are there additional comments? Councilmember Herbold.
Thank you so much. Just speaking to the substitute here before us, really appreciate Councilmember Peterson for his leadership in moving this discussion forward. I do feel a great deal of urgency associated with acting on the city auditor's recommendations. We don't have a lot of options before us to address maintenance. Just a little bit of history on our funding sources for SDOT. Some folks might recall that the 2015 MOVE levy was set up differently than the previous Bridging the Gap levy. The previous levy dedicated a higher proportion of funds to maintaining our critical transportation infrastructure than the current MOVE levy does. And I think that is part of why we're in the position that we're in right now. The MOVE levy goes all the way through 2024. So what that means is the council will not have the opportunity to address levy funding and increasing transportation infrastructure maintenance, a major funding source for that, until 2024, and other options for dedicated transportation funding are limited. And I'm just having a hard time with the recommendation that we turn over to a citywide transportation stakeholder group. The question of whether or not we use these funds to address the recommendations of our city auditor. The city council, I think, is charged with making the tough decisions about how to address recommendations from the city auditor. It's up to council and the mayor to implement those recommendations. And Seattle Municipal Code 3.40.050 reads, under the section called Audit Reports, Follow-up Required. It says, it is city policy to follow up on audit reports by the city auditor. I'm concerned that this creates a troubling precedent that undermines this policy and undermines the seriousness that we are supposed to, with which we are supposed to consider the recommendations of the city auditor and act on it. And again, I just don't think we should be turning over the question of how to identify the funding to address these recommendations to a city-wide stakeholder group. I think there's been some conversation about funds that are unspent and are available to add transit capacity. We know that there is about a $20 million reserve from unspent funds from the Transportation Benefit District that could be available in 2021 for adding additional transit services if it's needed. We do know that there's a 60% reduction in use of transit right now because of COVID-19. And the SDOT Transportation Benefit District plan itself sort of parks $8 million that we thought we would be using for transit in 2021, again, because of this concern that we should not be moving forward and committing to spend dollars for capacity until we know that we actually need it. The moment I heard that one of SDOT's concerns about pursuing a $47 million repair for their West Seattle Bridge was in large part due to the $500,000 annual maintenance cost, which is twice the maintenance cost estimate for a new bridge. That's when I asked myself, why would we build a new bridge at nearly 10 times the cost to primarily avoid the higher cost of maintaining the bridge that we have, especially if the experts tell us that we can get another 30 to 40 years out of the bridge that we have? And the answer to that question is because SDOT's not confident that we are going to fulfill our obligation to adequately fund maintenance. Learning this really felt like a challenge to me to do my part to be a better steward of our public assets. I think Councilmember Peterson handled the issue of whether or not bridges are car centric. I reject that notion. We are proposing to focus funding on bridges that are part of our frequent transit network. In the example of the West Seattle Bridge, just as an example of one bridge and how it functions like many, many others do in the frequent transit network. The West Seattle Bridge, when it was open, carried 13 different bus lines, 17,000 people, and 900 different trips every day. That bridge is a transit workhorse. And to suggest that our bridge infrastructure is infrastructure that primarily serves cars and single occupancy vehicles, I think that is something that we need to really struggle with that definition if we are ever going to do a better job of maintaining these failing public assets. And so with that, I am not going to be supporting the substitute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Herbold. I'll chime in here very briefly before turning it back over to, and then I see Councilmember Lewis. I want to thank Councilmember Peterson, Herbold, and Lewis for bringing forward the initial piece of, I was going to say legislation, and also the CBA included in this consent package. I'm obviously supportive of the efforts. That's why it was in the initial proposal here for us to have it as part of the consent package. But I'm even more supportive of the proposed amendment by the Council President here today. I think we all know that there's a huge need for additional transportation funding, from transit services to services for essential workers, to safe infrastructure for people who are walking and biking, to making sure that we have the bridge maintenance necessary to ensure the long-term viability of our infrastructure. And I do want to correct my earlier statement. I do not think it should go unsaid that we know that folks who use transit, who are using our buses, they need their bridges to function. I know, having biked over the lower bridge here in West Seattle and walked over the lower bridge, that bridge has to function for pedestrians and bikers as well. So I want to make sure to correct my earlier statement that I don't want to pit infrastructure against key other infrastructure investments in our city. And I think that that's an important clarification. I think Councilmember Herbold, you alluded to it, and I want to just call it out directly. Those who are using bikes and walking, running, and transit, they also use our bridges, and it connects our city. So it's incredibly important. But transparency and inclusion as we make these decisions about taxpayer dollars is also important for me to comment on. I'm supportive of the effort to make sure that we're pulling together a table to make sure that there is a inclusive conversation about identifying strategies for investing in key infrastructure, and that includes bridge maintenance. The conversation will include additional state and federal sources that we're looking at to make sure that there is a robust plan for how we best leverage these vehicle license fees. And I support the Council President's amendment because I think that it helps lift up the importance of having folks who are able to come to the table very quickly in early 2021 and to have us not miss a beat. The ability to pull together a task force is not going to delay us, because we see already that the estimated timeline, if we pass the vehicle license fee today, it will take 6 months to begin collecting the VLF revenue for vital transportation services and infrastructure. So I am supportive of passing the increased package today, while we also initiate this inclusive conversation. And we've specified here with labor, with transportation equity groups, with transportation advisory boards and commissions, to create a plan, a spend plan for the council to engage in a public and transparent and deliberative process. Again, there is incredible crossover among various stakeholders who have already expressed support for the process outlined in the council president's proposal here. In addition to hearing from the folks from the Mass Coalition and other transit advocates, I've spoken to leaders within the building trades, and I want to thank them. I think they are also interested in making sure that we get investments in bridges. They have been very clear about that, and other infrastructure is important as well. And they would like to sit at the table and have these discussions, because they also see that the data is going to continue to come up. We are going to be able to help look at the data and make data informed decisions through a collaborative process with the stakeholder table. As the council president noted, if there is a reduction in the timeline, not an expansion, I would be very supportive of that as well, because we still have about a 6-month process. So as long as we are staying within that 6-month timeframe and getting those recommendations even earlier, great. But I think that because of the broad stakeholder support for, yes, including the VLF funding today, and also creating a stakeholder task force, I would like to see this as a replacement to the item that was originally considered in the consent package. And again, I think that this conversation has been spurred by the folks who brought this forward. So thanking Councilmember Peterson, Herbold, and Lewis for bringing this forward, and Council President Gonzalez for your substitute today. Appreciate all our work from Aaron House and doing some additional research and conversations with stakeholders as well. Really important that we do this, get those dollars into community and invest in the infrastructure that is so vitally needed. And I'd love to do that in a way that is more inclusive through the stakeholder process as identified in the amendment. Council Member Lewis, I believe you are next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And one of the advantages of going almost last is I can be briefer, because a lot of my points have already been made by Council Members Herbold and Peterson. I do just briefly want to say that generally I'm very supportive in a lot of the policies that I've been promoting here over the last year to develop stakeholder processes that involve a broad array of advocates and people with whose interests are going to be affected by city policy. This is a little different for me today, because the way I see it, and Councilmember Herbold alluded to this, we are acting on a recommendation from the auditor to reach a goal that has been laid out with a sense of urgency that has been made very stark and apparent by the failure of the West Seattle Bridge. One point that I want to make from reviewing that audit is while only 5 bridges are listed in poor condition, 5 too many, and no city should tolerate having 5 bridges in poor condition, there's 50 bridges listed as fair. It should be noted the West Seattle Bridge was not historically considered a bridge in poor condition, and that an ounce of prevention can be worth a pound of cure, because these 50 fair bridges of today are the poor bridges of tomorrow, unless we take assertive action to maintain them adequately. And it really, I think the audit underscores that there is an infrastructure time bomb that the city is facing and that we have chronically underinvested in. The minimum that the audit identified was $34 million. This proposal of the VLF fee, combined with some of the other resources the council is investing, will get us to 18 million, I believe, which is still far short of that minimum recommendation from the auditor. So I think it's really important. I think it's something that we should move on now to make this investment with certainty that the department, the transportation department needs to be able to really scale up and maintain this vital and important infrastructure. We've seen the impact of historically underinvesting in these bridges manifested this year with the West Seattle Bridge. 20 years ago, after the Nisqually quake, it was the Magnolia Bridge that had a long-term shutdown. There's a number of other bridges that have been experiencing problems. The Ballard Bridge has been stuck in the up position several times in recent months. The University Bridge is on the poor list, and similarly a drawbridge that could have similar problems. And I just want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position where by refusing to pay today, we'll pay a bigger price with unplanned closures down the road if we don't start making more strategic investments in this really critical area. I also just want to note that we do still have more car tab authority that could be voter approved, as is indicated on the Transportation Benefit District sheet. I know there's been a lot of talk about potentially doing a county-wide car tab measure to backfill the fare subsidy loss that we've experienced from not having the luxury being able to do that renewal because of the pending litigation when we had to put the Transit Benefit District renewal on the ballot. I'd be interested in pursuing a county-wide measure like that, and if that's not possible, in pursuing a city-wide measure. And I think that that's just one more tool in addition to the tools that Councilmember Herbold and Peterson enumerated earlier that could be pursued for fare subsidy and other critical transportation investments. But in the meantime, I think this fairly more modest $3.6 million investment would be well suited to give the Department of Transportation a leg up in continuing to make these really important investments in bridges all over the city and in all of our districts. So with that, I don't have anything else to add and appreciate the conversation.
Excellent, thank you. Council President, would you like to close out discussion here?
I would, thank you. I'll just make a quick rebuttal to some of the arguments that were raised by those who spoke this afternoon. I guess late afternoon now, it's almost 4 o'clock. Okay, really quickly, I think the sponsors and supporters of the original council budget action all went through a long list of bridge maintenance needs at the city. And I think that the inference there is that I somehow don't believe that there is a need to maintain our bridges in the city of Seattle. And I want to say for the record that is not an accurate characterization of my position. There is no question in my mind that bridge maintenance is a need throughout the city. That, of course, was bolstered by the recent city auditor findings that conclude that there is approximately $100 million worth of bridge maintenance that needs to occur throughout the city. So if my substitute, which endeavors to acknowledge that bridge maintenance is needed, but also wants to see a stakeholder process be undertaken, is being read as a denial of the need for bridge maintenance, I want to encourage my colleagues, or I want to communicate to my colleagues that that is not the case. I agree that there is a need for bridge maintenance. And so when Councilmember Peterson says that we don't need a stakeholder process to determine whether our bridges are breaking, that's not what the stakeholder process is designed to do as I'm proposing it. The stakeholder process, I believe, is necessary in order to guide city council decision-making around what the best use of this additional vehicle license fee would be. It is the case that the stakeholders could determine that bridge maintenance is one of those things that should be prioritized. And it would be my hope that those recommendations would also include levels of appropriate appropriation of how to spend those additional dollars on bridge maintenance, given the need identified by the city auditor office. I will note for the record and for consideration by council members who may be undecided on this issue, that when the vehicle license fee was first instituted in 2011, there was a community and stakeholder process that was undertaken in order to devise and come up with a spending plan. And that was done before the city council adopted the spending plan. And so I think that we are out of step by not doing that in this instance, and instead identifying individual council member priorities for purposes of capturing these dollars and using these dollars for only bridges. And so I just want to acknowledge that that's a historical piece of information that I did receive from SDOT as it relates to the prior process related to developing the spending plan for the VLF. So that's one point I wanted to make in terms of the need. There's also an argument made that it would be a dereliction of our duty to delegate this to a stakeholder process when we have a city auditor report telling us that it's an issue and we have an obligation to address it. I agree that we have an obligation to address the issues identified by the city auditor as it relates to bridge maintenance, but I suppose I have a difference of opinion on whether or not having a stakeholder process as part of our responsibility and response to addressing the concerns and the needs identified by the city auditor as being a dereliction of duty. I believe that the city auditor's report did not say that bridge maintenance is paramount and the most important thing as compared to other things. I think there's still sort of an opportunity and flexibility even in light of the city auditor's findings that allow the city council to exercise its discretion in determining how to allocate and whether to allocate certain types of revenue sources to certain types of needs. In the instance of the city auditor report, the needs of bridge maintenance. So I wanted to address that really quickly. Third, I heard Councilmember Peterson mention that this budget action is only about $3.6 million and that it's just for 2021. I want to be really clear that that is not actually what this bill does. This bill is $3.6 million, not just for 2021, but for every year after that. It would allocate $3.6 million at a minimum for every year after the passage of this bill. In addition, it's my belief and understanding that the sponsors intend to capture not just the $3.6 million, but the full $7.2 million. And that belief is based on the following quote that comes from the press release that was issued by the sponsors, which reads, quote, "The legislation would raise an additional $3.6 million in 2021 and an additional $7.2 million in subsequent years. The council members propose to direct the additional funding to bridges with high frequency public transit," close quote. So it is my belief that the intent behind this bill is to capture every dollar generated from the vehicle license fee in both 2021 and in the out years for purposes of bridge maintenance. And I have the intent in black and white right in front of me. So that's the third point I wanted to make. The fourth issue I wanted to address is the issue that Chair Mosqueda, you addressed about an insinuation that bridges are only for single occupancy vehicles. I, of course, don't believe that that is a true principle. We are a city that is surrounded by water and that has water dispersed throughout our city. And I myself personally understand the impact of the West Seattle Bridge in particular, as is a huge need for maintenance and for repair and potential replacement. And so I don't want it to go unsaid that just because I'm advancing this substitute that somehow I believe that bridges are only for single occupancy vehicle. That's not true at all. And so I agree with the proponents of the original council bill who feel strongly that bridges are in fact part of our transportation network. Lastly, Chair, I will end with the questions related to the length of the stakeholder process as originally proposed in my substitute bill. It is a 6 month, well, technically it's a 5 month stakeholder process with the 6 month being passage of a spending plan. I am happy to make a verbal amendment now to modify that stakeholder process to 3 months. Likewise, if that is not consistent with the procedures set out by the chair and with council central staff's expectations and preferences, I would give my word to the council members and state here publicly that I would intend to bring a amendment forward for consideration on Monday to amend the substitute to have a 3-month stakeholder process rather than a 5-month stakeholder process. Happy to do that in any way that you all feel would be procedurally appropriate.
Thank you for suggesting that. Now is a perfect time to make that verbal amendment. I'm a fan of trying to put a bow around things so we can move on to the next one. If that is your intent, I'd love to do that now. Just as we maybe tee up the ability to do that between Ali and Calvin, I will just also note on the 4th item that you mentioned regarding bridges being car-centric, I believe that was a reference to something I had said in the last 2 weeks. So I just owned it and I corrected my statement because I want to make sure folks know we understand transit, pedestrian, bikes, all sorts of multimodal options rely on bridges as well. So thank you for calling that out, council members, and happy to have my statement corrected. Just before we go on to additional comments, I want to make sure that Ali and Cal, you have what you need for receiving a verbal amendment to change 6 to 3.
I believe so. I just want to confirm that it would be to change the SDOT's engagement with the community groups to April 1st, and then have a council approve the spending plan a month later. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oops.
Yes, I think that's that would be correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we take that motion officially, Councilmember Herbold, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I'll make it super quick. I just want to say 2 things for the record. One, my correction regarding whether or not bridges are car-centric. We're not directed to either Council Chair Mosqueda nor Council President Gonzalez. It was in response to things that I heard in public comment today. And then secondly, I just want to clarify, the legislative intent is in the bill, council bill itself, and it does not allocate funding to bridges in perpetuity. The action as it relates specifically to the council budget action, it relates to 2021, and that is the action that, as I understand it, and Cal, please correct me if I'm wrong, that is the action that expresses our intent for 1 year. Because I too have been saying I'm willing to revisit the issue of the other 3.6 million in future years.
Council members, just speaking to the legislation itself, the legislation authorizes the expenditure for any eligible transportation purpose. So the revenue stream is not obliged. The council budget action would direct the 2021 revenues towards bridge maintenance, and it does not speak to future years.
Thank you so much.
Council President, we have in front of us your substitute BLG 042B 001. Would you like to make a motion for a verbal amendment to the date?
I would like to make a motion to amend the dates for the stakeholder process to require that the stakeholder process conclude on or before April 1st of 2021, and that would require the council take final action on the spending plan on or before May 1st, 2021.
Second.
The verbal amendment has been moved and seconded. Are there any additional comments on the verbal amendment to Council Bill Substitute BLG 042B 001?
For the record, I did second, but I also want to add that Council President Gonzalez, everyone knows you care about bridge maintenance.
Thank you. Because I need a bridge to get into.
I know you do. That's why I'm laughing. I know you want that bridge, girl.
Maybe 2. Hey, Councilmember Peterson, did you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to, the amendment, as I understand it, it's on or before, so a faster process could actually take place. Okay, because that's
correct.
I think 5 months from today is when it would be enacted. So if something can happen faster, it's on or before. So thank you for clarifying.
Excellent. Any additional clarifying questions or comments? Okay, Councilmember Herbold.
I'm sorry, do we have a motion in a second already? on
Yes,
that?
we do. Thank you so much.
I just want to say for the record, my concern is not about the length of the process. My concern is about opening up the use of this revenue source to other uses other than bridge maintenance. I think one way for us all to show how much we care about bridge maintenance is not introducing a process that might conceivably could result in no money for bridge maintenance. So thank you.
So the item is moved and seconded to amend the proposed substitute, and that way we will have the accurate reflected substitute in front of us. And then, colleagues, I'm going to call through whether or not you want to include this substitute, and then we would vote on the substitute. So there's 3 votes, if I'm correct, in front of us, and I'm seeing nods from central staff. That's always helpful. So right now we are amending the proposed substitute to include on or before April 1st, which shortens the timeline for the stakeholder process. This is a verbal amendment to BLG 042B001. Seeing no additional comments, will the clerk please call the roll on the verbal amendment to BLG 042B001?
Lewis,
Aye.
Morales,
Aye.
Sawant,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Juarez,
Yes.
Strauss,
Yes.
Herbold,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Chair Mosqueda,
Yes.
9 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The motion carries and the substitute is amended as described. Okay, colleagues, now we are going to consider moving the substitute in front of us. Before I request the clerk to call the roll on the motion to substitute, I want to remind folks that council members that a yes vote or an aye vote is to reject the version on the agenda, and a no vote is to reject the substitute. Okay, so if you want to include the substitute language that we just discussed and amended, then you would vote aye to substitute. If you want to keep the original language as presented on the agenda, you would vote no. Anything else to add, Madam Clerk or Ally, before we continue? Okay.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you say that one more time? Just so that it's clear in my head.
Yes. Ally, would you like to?
Sure. If you vote yes, you're voting on the motion to substitute. So your version would be before the committee after that vote. If you vote no, you're retaining the original item as published to the agenda and sponsored by Councilmember Peterson.
We always want to make sure that that's clear because this is where it gets tricky at the end of a long day. Okay, I'm seeing no additional hands. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to substitute?
Lewis,
No.
Morales,
Yes.
Sawant,
Yes.
Peterson,
No.
Juarez,
No.
Strauss,
Yes.
Herbold,
No.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Chair Mosqueda,
Yes.
5 in favor, 4 opposed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion carries and BLG 042B001 as amended is now before us. Are there any additional comments before final vote on this item? Councilmember Swan, please go ahead.
I move to substitute CBA BLG 42C1 in place of CBA BLG 42B1.
Thank you, Councilmember Sawant. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Sawant, you are recognized to describe your amendment to the amended substitute.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, this substitution does not change the spending plans and procedures in any way. And to be clear, that means that I would also accept the same verbal amendment to make the stakeholder process 3 months instead of 5 months that was just adopted in CBA BLG 42B1. What it changes in this amendment is where the money comes from, increasing progressive taxes on big business instead of taxes on working people. Washington State in general, and Seattle in particular, has had one of the most regressive tax systems in the nation, with poor and working class people paying a far higher portion of their paychecks in local taxes than the rich. Council members often lament the regressive taxes, but it took a grassroots mass movement leadership independent of the establishment, and 30,000 signatures for the threat of a viable ballot initiative to ultimately force big business and the political establishment to concede on the Amazon tax. In this case, the City Council has a very clear choice between a regressive or a progressive tax, and I urge Council members to vote yes on this substitution for the progressive option. The vehicle license fee, commonly known as car tabs, is one of the most deeply regressive and punishing taxes on working people. And because it is so deeply regressive, precisely because it is so deeply regressive and it is hated, correctly so, by ordinary people, by poor people, right-wing figures like Tim Eyman end up being able to cynically tap into that anger, the genuine anger, to attack essential transit funding. When I say car tabs are punishing, I mean that literally. Poor people go to jail for the crime of poverty because of unpaid car tabs. If you cannot afford your car tabs, you can get a very expensive ticket, even if your car is just parked on the street. And since people who have trouble affording car tabs are also often poor enough not to have driveways or private parking, that happens a lot. Then if you do not pay the ticket for expired car tabs, the state revokes your driver's license. Then if you need to drive to work without a license anyway, which you very likely do because you also have now been pushed farther and farther away from your work because of skyrocketing rents, you are now driving without a license, which is a gross misdemeanor. I wanted to relate actually a personal experience from Ted Verdone, one of the staff members in my office who had to go to court 4 times when he was charged with a misdemeanor because of car tabs. Eventually, his charge was reduced to a traffic infraction after the 4th court date. But you can imagine what an onerous burden this places on ordinary people, especially when many of them are holding 2 jobs, now many of them facing unemployment. In 2015, when I was arrested alongside other activists from the $15 minimum wage struggle while engaging in nonviolent direct action in SeaTac to demand Alaska Airlines abide by the $15 minimum wage law. In my jail cell, virtually all of the 8 to 10 women in my cell were in jail because of traffic and car-related violations, and expired car tabs as the original reason was a common theme. This is anecdotal, but we have overwhelming statistical evidence of the consequences of regressive taxes on working and poor people and on our society as a whole. Yes, we need revenues for buses and bridges, but there is absolutely no reason for the City Council to keep approving regressive taxes like car tabs. We already have the Amazon tax. The council approved this summer. Amazon is reporting record profits. Amazon is not the only company reporting staggering profits. There are many others, and we could easily increase the taxes by a minuscule degree on them instead. Finally, I would like to explain the technical details of how this substitute budget amendment works, because my office has also submitted 3 other budget amendments using a similar approach, which is using the Amazon tax and increasing the Amazon tax to achieve a certain funding goal. The Amazon tax, technically called a payroll tax that our movement won this past summer, taxes big business in 6 different tiers depending on the size of the business and depending on the size of the salaries of their highest paid employees. Those 6 tiers each have a tax rate. This budget amendment, and similarly the other 3 budget amendments that my office has proposed, would add in a proportional way to the tax rate in each of those 6 tiers. Because these budget amendments add to the tax rate, they can each be considered separately, and support for one of those amendments neither requires support for nor conflicts with any of the other amendments to increase the tax rate. Each amendment stands alone. For this budget amendment, not surprisingly, mathematically, the increases to the big business tax rates are extremely small. In fact, when my office was preparing this amendment, we needed to add smaller decimal places because otherwise the increases were all rounding to zero. This budget amendment would add the following to the big business tax rates. For businesses whose total payroll is from $7 million to $100 million, salaries of their employees from $150,000 to $400,000 annually, the tax rate increase would be 0.012%. For salaries over $400,000 annually, it would be 0.029%. For businesses with a total payroll of $100 million to $1 billion, the salaries from $150,000 to $400,000, the increase would be 0.012%. Salaries over $400,000, 0.032. And now for the payroll companies that exceeds, for companies for whom the payroll exceeds $1 billion, the salaries from 150 to 400, the increase would be 0.024%, and salaries over 400,000 would be 0.04%. As council members can see, these are absolutely minuscule tax rates for corporations, especially that have actually been reporting unprecedented profits since April. So I really hope that council members will support this and really just break away from the regressive tax measures once and for all. And I've heard council members in the last hour of discussion saying that this is nothing new. Well, just because something was done in the past doesn't make it right. The regressive taxes have always been bad. Car tabs have always been one of the most punishing taxes. The city council should break from it and increase the Amazon tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sawant. It's been moved and seconded to consider your amendment, your substitute BLG 042C001. Is there any additional comments? Okay. Seeing none. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on BLG 042C001?
Lewis,
No.
Morales,
No.
Sawant,
Yes.
Peterson,
No.
Juarez,
Sorry, no.
Strauss,
No.
Herbold,
No.
Gonzalez,
No.
Chair Mosqueda,
No.
1 in favor, 8 opposed.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The motion fails and BLG 042C001 is not approved. That leaves us with BLG 042B001 as verbally amended in front of us. Are there any additional comments on the motion before final passage? Again, this is related to vehicle license fees and the committee that has been set up in a shorter time frame to provide recommendations, including recommendations on bridges and other infrastructure. Okay, I am seeing no additional hands. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on approval of BLG 042B001 as amended?
Lewis,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Sawant,
Yes.
Peterson,
Abstain.
Juarez,
Yes.
Strauss,
Yes.
Herbold,
No.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Chair Mosqueda,
Aye.
1 abstention, 1 no, 7 ayes.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The motion carries. And BLG 042B001 as amended is approved, and it will be part of the amendment consent package. Let's go ahead to the next item, hoping this will be relatively quick and we can get through a few more here tonight. Madam Alley, would you like to read item 136 FG003B001, and any additional context would be helpful.
Thank you. Okay, so this was item 136 on the agenda, FG3B1, which would impose a proviso on $29.9 million in finance general for the Equitable Communities Initiative. I believe this item was removed from the package and that there will be a substitute to make a correction because the wrong version of this amendment was posted to the agenda, and there are some corrections to the proviso. So once you move this item, so it's before the committee, I'll ask my colleague Asha to just describe what is, and then once you move the item and then make the motion to substitute, I will ask my colleague Asha to describe the specific differences between the original item and the substitute version.
Thank you very much. I move that Council Budget Action FG 003B 001B remove, wait for an official vote. I already did that. Okay, let me move on to the next part of my script here. I move to substitute Council Budget Action FG 003B 002 and put this in, let me try this again, colleagues. I would like to insert substitute FG 003B 002 in place of FG 003B 001.
Madam Chair,
yes.
I think maybe I missed it. I think you first need to move approval of FG3B1 and then you move to substitute.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I believe you're right. Just for the sake of clarity, let's move the original version first and then move the substitute. Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Let's try this again, folks. Getting to that point of the day where I am making things more complicated. I move that Council Budget Action FG 003B 001 be removed for an individual vote. This does not require a second or a vote. That allows for it to be in front of us.
I'm sorry, Chair. The motion would be to adopt that. You would motion to vote to consider the item since it's already been removed, and then we would motion to substitute.
All right, folks, bear with me here. I move to substitute. Does that sound right?
Councilmember Mosqueda.
I'm happy to make the motion.
Thank you, Council President.
Yeah, I move adoption of FG 003B001.
Second.
Now you can move your substitute.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Before we move on with discussion, I would like to move to substitute FG 003B002 in place of FG 003B001.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Thank you very much for your support, colleagues, in getting through that. We now have FG 003B002 in front of us. Inadvertently had the wrong item uploaded, and I apologize for that. I'll turn it over to Allie, and then I'll provide a little bit of explanation.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. If my colleague Asha is on the line, could you please describe what is the changes between version 1 and version 2 that is the substitute?
So in version 1, in the first proviso that's listed, so Patty, if you could scroll down just onto the second page, the first version had indicated that in that proviso for the $29.5 million, that the authority wouldn't be granted until the executive submitted to the council a plan for spending the funds that described how the allocations were informed by and reflected alignment between the task force's recommendations and the participatory budgeting process's recommendations. The new version that is intended for passage only asks that the plan be submitted with the plan for spending the funds that describes how the allocations were informed, and then expects that there would be alignment between the participatory budgeting process and the task force's process. So the difference is just in the new version, it's expecting alignment around the processes rather than expecting alignment around the recommendations.
I think that there's actually a little bit more caveat there. The most important takeaway here is that the council gets the final say, and the recommendations we are expecting there to be alignment with the conversations happening at the participatory budgeting process. This is the language that we have talked to various stakeholders about, and I want to make sure that we are in alignment not only with the process, but also making sure that we as the council have a chance to look at alignment with recommendations and how the conversations are going. I do also want to reiterate that there is not timelines associated with either process, so the council will still be able to keep a pulse on how those discussions are going within the more robust participatory budgeting process, and make sure that it's not duplicative and consistent with our conversations. Okay, any additional comments? Seeing none, let's see if we can do this. Council members, I don't see any additional comments. Could the clerk please
Councilmember Mosqueda, I apologize. There was a comment from Councilmember Herbold.
Oh, hi, Councilmember Herbold.
Oh, sorry, I had my camera off and I had my hand up in the air. I just want to clarify what we're talking about as it relates to alignment. There was a Equitable Communities Initiative task force meeting yesterday, and I feel like I gave some information about what the council's expectations were, and said that, you know, our proviso could have a lot of different expectations, and that aside from a report back to us, we weren't binding the Equitable Communities Initiative to collaborate or go through the participatory budgeting process. And so I'm just concerned that this language, that the expectation that there will be alignment between the task force and participatory budgeting process, I feel I'm just a little bit, I'm a little bit concerned about what message we're sending with this language. Are we talking about alignment of timetables, or are we talking about the alignment of processes?
I believe it's the alignment of processes and I'm sorry, alignment of timetables to make sure that there is synergy. We are not directing there to be anything that feeds into participatory budgeting, and to alleviate that concern as well, we have also checked in with the executive's office to make sure that this doesn't get crosswise with those conversations we had previously, and have confirmed even this afternoon in inadvertently having the wrong version uploaded, that we were on the same page still. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you so much. And given my comments about my concern, I don't want to suggest that there isn't interest in alignment around processes, but I think those are, whether or not that's going to happen or not, is dependent on pending conversations that haven't happened yet. And I just don't want to tie these investments to the outcomes of conversations that haven't happened. So
that's right. I put it as an invitation, but there's no directive. So thank you for that additional context. Okay. So we now have FG 003B 002 in front of us. Is there any additional comments? Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll on this substitute?
Lewis.
Aye.
Morales. I'm sorry, Morales?
Yes.
Thank you. Sawant?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Juarez?
Yes.
Strauss?
Yes.
Herbold?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Chair Mosqueda?
Yes.
9 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That was the motion to substitute. Appreciate you putting that item in front of us now. The motion carries, and substitute FG 003B 002 is in front of us for final vote. Are there any additional comments? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll on the final vote of FG 003B 002?
Lewis.
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Sawant.
Yes.
Peterson.
Yes.
Juarez.
Yes.
Strauss.
Yes.
Herbold.
Yes.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Chair Mosqueda.
Aye.
9 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion carries. And FG003B002 carries and is approved. Let's see if we can get at least one more item into our agenda for today. Moving on to item 141.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. Item 141 that was removed by Council Member Peterson. Home 21A1 would add $800,000 to the Human Services Department to support operations of self-managed encampments. And this item was sponsored by Councilmember Swart.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I am going to turn it over to Councilmember Peterson for discussion about the removal, and then I will turn it over to Councilmember Sawant. Just remind me, there is not a substitute on this one, is there? This is for the purpose of discussion, Councilmember Peterson?
Correct.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure I had my script ready, and just in case, given that I was fumbling through that last time. So for the purposes of discussion and greater clarification, would love to hear more from you, Councilmember Peterson, if you'd like to talk about the items that you would like to feature on this before we turn it over to the sponsor.
Just to clarify the process at this point on these items, these are items that were pulled from the Group B consent package. So, so in this case, I wanted to pull it because I'll be voting no on it, and then, but I wanted to support the rest of the consent package.
Excellent. Okay.
I can just a couple sentences on my thoughts here.
That's welcome. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I know we all want to reduce homelessness in Seattle, and we've got different approaches and perspectives on this, and we've read different studies, and we've seen different things in our own districts. And I worked at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, so I've seen things from the perspective of applying for competitive grant proposals to reduce homelessness. And I just have a particular focus on investing on what's proven to work best. There are some emerging ideas, and certainly for me, it was an evolving position on tiny home villages, and I've got a different, very specific perspective on that in terms of wanting robust case management, wanting to be focused on exiting people to permanent housing that's affordable. We will be putting a tiny home village in the University District. Wallingford was very welcoming of the tiny home village that was there for over the past 2 years. There are different ways to do tiny home villages. My concern with this proposal is in reading the budget action description that it's potentially going to organizations that may not have the infrastructure to receive and manage the funding from Human Services Department. So it's asking to identify non-traditional ways of awarding these funds. And I feel like there are enough proven strategies that could use the funding in terms of like an enhanced shelter model, or something with robust case management. We're actually tracking the outcomes. And so it's just a different orientation that I have on it. And so I'll be voting no on this particular proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I turn over to the sponsor, let's get it in front of us officially. Council members, I move approval of HOM 021A001 is to be included in the voting group B consent packet. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded. Thank you very much, Councilmember Peterson, again for your explanation of its pull. I'm going to turn it back over to Councilmember Sawant for further discussion and comments. Councilmember Sawant, any additional comments on the item?
Sorry. I've already spoken at length about the importance of tiny house villages as a whole. But earlier today, I also talked about how there is not only one model, that there are self-managed models, and there are models that aren't modeled on those lines. And we have a lot of testimonials from residents themselves. These are not our opinions that we have crafted in the safety of our homes, but this is the overwhelming testimony of the residents and the past residents of the Nicholsville villages about how the self-managed villages, the self-managed component is what suited them better. And that it helped them overcome the crushing isolation and alienation of living on the streets. Councilmember Peterson mentioned the tiny house village in Wallingford, I believe. In fact, the tiny house village in Wallingford is an example that would be funded with these funds because it is a Nicholsville tiny house village. We have, my office have talked to Share, Wheel, and Nicholsville. They have authorized villages that receive, I mean, these villages are authorized villages, but they currently receive no support from the city. And those villages, if we give them financial support, would be really transformed by electricity, tiny houses, garbage services, and hygiene trailers. So this budget amendment is about providing funds to concretely improve people's lives. Can the city help an authorized encampment get electricity, get sanitation, upgrade tents to tiny houses, get a hygiene trailer with laundry and showers? These are the components we are talking about. I mean, Tent City 3, for example, does not yet have tiny houses, but it is still an important community for its residents. And in fact, especially in the time of COVID, I think we should be doing everything in our power to enable the different models that have a proven track record of success, because what's even more important right now is that the tiny house villages are actually helping people keep COVID infections at bay. We've heard this, and this is so important as our city and region heads into a new and extremely troubling and worrisome spike in the infection rates. As far as the question of any discomfort with informal arrangements, I would say that the fact that the city has maintained utilities at the North Lake Village is an example of the creative solutions we've been advocating for. So any discomfort that may be experienced with this informal arrangement, in my view, pales in comparison with the discomfort and the suffering of the residents of North Lake if they were to lose their utilities. And as far as case management is concerned, these are all, I mean, these are not real things. I mean, no case management is going to be lost. This budget amendment does not remove case management from any shelter. These funds are to support more humane conditions in already authorized encampments. They do not take funding away from case management. And in fact, we would support, and my office has consistently supported, adding case management services whenever that is possible. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Is there additional comments? Councilmember Herbold.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Is the intention to make a distinction between encampments, tent encampments, and tiny house villages here? Is that part of the intent?
No, there was no intention. We just want both models to be supported.
So encampments includes tiny house villages?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm not opposed to this. I do have a question about the fund source, but I just want to clarify that even tiny house villages that are don't have as their fiscal agent multi-million-dollar organizations, and including those that do, they all consider themselves self-managed. So my tiny house village here in District 1 is the fiscal agent is Lehigh, but they definitely consider themselves self-managed. So if you are intending this to go to something other than a Lehigh sponsored encampment, I think the language needs to be different. That the tiny house Camp Second Chance here in West Seattle, they have their own rules, and that they have a process for enforcing those rules. And I think there's a difference of opinion of sort of scales of self-management that we've seen among different hosts of tiny house villages and tent encampments. So if the intent is for this to not go to a self-management tiny house village that an organization like Lehigh is the fiscal sponsor for, then I think the language needs to be something different. I agree with you. I think self-management is of encampments is why we have such a an evolved and sophisticated model that is working right now because of the history of city support for sanctioned encampments. It has allowed for this evolution of a model that is providing outcomes. My question related to the fund source, though, is I see that the funds for this action come from specifically the funds associated with one of the items in the consent package, and that's 139 5E1, which memorializes the agreements between outreach providers and advocates and the mayor's office, and includes specific funding in order to both relocate 425 additional people from unsafe conditions into safe lodging with either temporary hotels and enhanced shelters, and specifically identifying the 125 enhanced shelter beds as one additional strategy and complementing the sheltering, the hoteling strategy. So we have sort of, we adopted this item earlier in the consent package. It is a very carefully negotiated sum of dollars in order to result in a particular outcome. And it's been negotiated with stakeholders as well as the mayor's office. We're trying to move forward together and, really trying to set out on a new approach rather than having a lot of conflict associated with how we address unsanctioned encampments. And so I'm just concerned that if we are going to be taking money away from this already sort of negotiated and agreed upon amount, that there could be trouble ahead.
Great. Yeah, let's get clarification on that because I believe it is additive. This is not among those dollars. So let's just double check. Ali and Jeff, I see you both online.
I was going to ask Jeff to answer the question. So excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, to Councilmember Herbal's first question, my understanding is correct, or that you're correct, that all of our sanctioned encampments, which we also call tiny home villages, would consider themselves self-managed. There's degrees to which that might be the case. And so that's why the CBA's language says a self-managed encampment, and this is where I think it departs from the model typically utilized by Lehigh, but that are not operated by a homelessness services agency. I don't believe we would categorize groups like Share and Wheel and Nicholsville as homeless services agencies, rather than it's maybe a more amorphous collaborative kind of concept of self-organization. And so that's the intention in the CBA to not talk about agencies that are funded, such as Lehigh, to operate tiny home villages. And then to your second question, you are correct that the CBA HOM 5E, I forget if it's 1 or 2 at this point, but that one is the CBA that you referred to, that refers to this framework about outreach and unsheltered populations and providing services to them and moving forward. That framework makes reference to opening 425 beds, and that includes the 300 beds proposed by the mayor using ESG funds in hotels, and then also a new 125 bed enhanced shelter. And the $250,000 that are leveraged here just resulted from simple math. It's according to HSD's own numbers, it costs about a little bit less than $20,000 for an enhanced shelter bed to be operated for an entire year. You take $20,000 and you multiply it by 125, it's just a little bit less than $2.5 million. Yet the mayor's proposed budget provided $2.75 million. So there just seems to be some padding in there that with the absence of an actual location or other reasons to believe costs would exceed what is the average cost, that it seems that could be reduced without actually having an impact on the operation of a 125 bed shelter as called for in that framework.
Jeff, did you already comment? The funding is additive, correct? It's not a slice of the other two homelessness efforts that we talked about being in tandem just before we went on recess. I mean, recess, our lunch break.
I believe by that you mean that this is in addition to the other pieces that are being funded. So yes, all of these are operating separately. This is not taking $250,000 from either of those two CBAs. It's taking $250,000 from a different part of the mayor's budget. There is intersect because of the topics.
Okay.
Okay, great. Councilmember Juarez, I'm just going to let you know, I think you are off mute. And I'm sure you're excited for the vote here soon, but I just want to let you know you're off mute. Is there any additional clarifying questions or comments? Central staff, if you have anything else you would like to add for clarification, you are welcome to.
No, not at this time.
Okay, council members, any additional comments or questions? Okay, Councilmember Herbold and then Councilmember Sawant.
I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure that you know, we've been funding Share a Wheel for many years under our homelessness investments, and I'm pretty sure they're considered a homelessness provider agency. Maybe that's something we could take a look at later, but just flagging it for now.
Thank you, Councilmember Herbold. Jeff, did you have a response?
Sure. My understanding is actually the Catholic Community Services acts as the fiscal sponsor for Share and Wheel because they don't have the capability of managing a city contract. They don't meet all the qualifications and requirements. And so we wouldn't technically call Share and Wheel a agency as much as maybe a subcontractor or someone in partnership with who our fiscal sponsor, the actual agency is.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, Councilmember Sawant, would you like to close this out on this item?
Yes, thank you for the clarifying questions, and I really appreciate Jeff Sims' absolutely thorough answers. I think that was really great. Just to add to what he said in terms of the question about self-management, yeah, I agree that there are different degrees of self-management and different kinds of setups might consider themselves self-managed. The question is not so much about that. I mean, the language in the amendment does not say self-management as a deciding factor. The intent is for less formal villages, which is the, so basically it covers both tiny home villages and the encampments that the Human Service Department currently does not fund because they do not check all the boxes. For example, not having a fiscal agent and so on. So that's the deciding factor. In the language of the amendment, the first sentence is this council budget action would support the operations of 2 self-managed encampments that are not operated by a homelessness services agency and would cover a range of potential encampment expenses, including utilities, hygiene facilities, moving expenses, so on. So the whole package of things that they would need.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Sawant. Again, there is no substitute on this item. This was pulled for the purposes of discussion. The item is in front of us. Council Budget Action HOM 021A001. Seeing no additional comments or questions, I'd like to ask the clerk to please go ahead and call the roll on this item for inclusion in Group B consent package.
Lewis.
Aye.
Morales.
Aye.
Sawant.
Yes.
Peterson.
No.
Juarez. Councilmember Juarez.
I think that's my fault for calling out being off of mute. We'll come back in just a second before we wrap up.
Councilmember Strauss.
Yes.
Councilmember Herbold.
Yes.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Aye.
Chair Mosqueda.
Aye. Let's go back to Councilmember Juarez.
Councilmember Juarez.
Oh, I see it accidentally went on mute again. Wait one more second.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks so much. And it is okay if the council member is not voting. We are in committee, so it is still
Oh, I am.
Oh, there you are.
God.
I
Come
see. I
on.
knew you were trying.
Okay.
Councilmember Juarez.
Aye.
8 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk and colleagues. The item carries, and there is approval of Council Bill HOM 021A001 as part of the consent amendment package. Okay, so we have 5 minutes. I believe 1 is for the purpose of discussion and 1 is a technical change that the council member wanted to see. Let's see what we can do here. Council member Sawant has LAW 002A001. To put it in front of us, I move approval of LAW 002A001 as included in voting group B's consent package. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the CBA. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Peterson, who pulled this item for first comments. Councilmember Peterson, additional comments or questions?
I believe it was Councilmember Herbold.
Oh, I apologize. Councilmember Herbold, additional comments or questions? I apologize, Councilmember Peterson.
Sure, thank you so much, and appreciate the opportunity for discussion on this one. I just want to raise the fact that, first of all, as required by the Council Accountability Ordinance passed in 2017, it reads, in consultation with the OPA, the CPC, and the chair of the Public Safety Committee, they will work to, they being the Office of the Inspector General, will solicit work plan suggestions. Just recently, the OIG has written to solicit work plan suggestions from each the OPA, the CPC, and myself. The process of looking at changes to the accountability structure, authority, and process to make improvements is charged to the Office of the Inspector General. And so it would be appropriate to request the Office of the Inspector General to research this issue. I would be happy to submit this work plan suggestion on behalf of Councilmember Sawant for OIG consideration and inclusion of this issue on her 2021 work plan. As it relates to the statement of legislative intent as drafted, it commits central staff to working on a bill. We all have 2021 and 2022 priorities, legislative priorities that central staff has not been able to dedicate time to during 2020 because of COVID, summer budget, this budget. And I'm concerned that this budget proposal would assume prioritization of council staff development of this legislation without any analysis at all first, whether or not this is policy that is possible. I would not be averse to council asking law to research the issue. I do not support having central staff work on the issue. Secondly, as it relates to the comment, I'm concerned that this proposal assumes that the CPC is not fulfilling its charge as passed by the council in 2017. When in fact, the fulfillment of its charge has been blocked because of many of its proposals that haven't been implemented. Some of those proposals depend on bargaining. And that also goes for recommendations from the OPA and the OIG. One example of when the CPC was far ahead of policymakers and the public relates to recommendations it made in years prior, specifically related to protest management. The police department made changes as it relates to crowd control, but not focused on protest management and enacting many of the recommendations that the CPC made. Another example of the CPC being ahead of the general public and ahead of policymakers relates to the need to have the expertise of community members with lived experiences interacting with the police department, that we should have them available as advisors to us on the LRPC, the Labor Relations Policy Committee, and they should be available for consultation with the labor relations negotiating team. This is something that we have now enacted in consultation with the executive, but this is an example of something that the CPC has been asking for years. And I feel very strongly that their effectiveness should not be measured by whether or not their recommendations have been implemented. Secondly, just want to highlight that the council in January adopted resolution 31930 regarding negotiations with the Police Officers Guild. The resolution included recommendations from the Community Police Commission, the Inspector General, and the Office of Police Accountability. And those recommendations are guiding us on the Labor Relations Policy Committee in developing our bargaining agenda. I'm concerned that as drafted, there's the potential that it would allow anyone to run for election, including opponents of police reform. And I'm concerned that if we approve this today, this could imply that council supports this as part of our bargaining. It would, in any case, need to go through the consent decree process, which, given approval, necessary approval of the three accountability bodies, could be a barrier to going through the consent decree process. And we cannot underestimate. It sounds like this is a small thing, but it is not a small thing. It would completely reinvent police accountability in Seattle. Again, we have three accountabilities that are about to participate with a formal role in negotiations with both the Police Management Association and the Police Officers Guild. I'm concerned that this that researching this issue at this time and working to develop legislation would really undercut them and undercut their ability to be partners to us in these negotiations. At the Community Police Commission meeting this morning, Co-Chair Reverend Walden noted that the 2017 Police Accountability Ordinance has not been fully implemented. This is an ordinance that was sponsored by Council President Gonzalez under her leadership and in partnership with the CPC. And Reverend Walden also noted that the court has ordered the city to bring a methodology for police accountability, and that has not yet been completed. She also referenced some of the points that I made as it relates to the consent decree and potential impacts on the CP's role in negotiations with SPMA and SPOG. So again, I would be open to a statement of legislative intent that only asks the law department to research this issue, or I would, should the statement of legislative intent not be passed today, I would also be happy to submit on behalf of the sponsor a request to the OIG for her consideration and determination whether or not it is an appropriate item for her 2021 work plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Herbold. I have Councilmember Sawant and then Council President. Councilmember Sawant, any comments?
I mean, I have several points, but also I had some questions because I'm not clear on some of the things that Councilmember Herbold is saying. But just on the last point that Councilmember Herbold made, and I want to make sure I understood it correctly. Did you say that if the amendment was amended to say that just the city attorney's office was asked to do this research and that central staff time will not be used, that you would be okay with that? Did I hear you right?
I would be open to considering it. It is not something that I'd be willing to vote on today, though.
Okay. So just to clarify on that one point, in fact, that is where my office started. We had just said city attorney's office, but then in the process of drafting it alongside central staff, it was suggested that we should have central staff and city attorney's office, which, I'm okay with it either way. But I wanted to also be clear that we, in this amendment, we're not just talking about research. We want the city attorney's office to draft the legislation for it. And so it is a substantive thing. And in fact, Councilmember Herbold said that this is not a small thing. It may seem like a small thing. No, it does not seem like a small thing at all. It is not a small thing. As you said, it is completely reinventing police accountability. And my response to that is it's high time the city council did something about this after having spent all year talking about Black Lives Matter and about police accountability and reimagining, everything. It's time to actually deliver on something and this is what this amendment is, this is what the statement of legislative intent is about. It is not about measuring any, it is not about measuring the Community Police Commission. It's not a judgment on their role. It is merely the People's Budget Movement and my office trying to actually do something on police accountability. And this body that is being proposed for the, for the research and the legislation development would not replace the Community Police Commission. It would replace the Office of Professional Accountability. So there's no conflict there. And similarly, I mean, I agree that the CPC's effectiveness should not be measured by whether or not their recommendations have been adopted. But that is precisely why we are recommending that the research and the legislation development happen in relation to an elected community oversight board, because it would be in terms of those elected members having to fight for re-election on the basis of whether or not they have delivered on the mandate of police accountability, automatically sets them in a different situation than right now, where all the agencies are reporting to the mayor's office, city council, and the police, and also are not independent of the police department. So in other words, the intent is for this future office or board to be independent of the mayor's office, the city council, and the police department, and making that an elected board, a board that is empowered democratically to hold police accountable. And they need to be empowered to have full oversight of over the police, to investigate, to subpoena, to discipline, to fire or hire. All of that they need to have the powers to do, which right now this is a really murky process, because the buck is being passed from one agency to another, from the city council to the mayor's office. In reality, the city council has not delivered on its promises. 2 years ago, a racist police contract was adopted by all city council members at that time, except for my no vote. And there are many instances where the community's voice has been ignored. So I do not believe that having an elected body is a panacea, because it hasn't been. The mayor and the city council, not just of this city, but city after city, where promises were made to the Black Lives Matter movement and those promises were betrayed. I don't believe that an elected body is a panacea. But what I do think is that being an elected board for the explicit purpose and mandate of bringing about police accountability will mean that they are going to be answerable to voters, because they themselves will be under pressure on one issue, not like the city council and the mayor, where politicians can do other somewhat progressive things and then run on those issues while actually letting people down on some critical issues like police accountability, like racism in the police department, like all the people who have been killed at the hands of the police and not one police officer having been brought to justice. So I think that's the substantive component of this. I mean, we're also told that the Office of Professional Accountability, the Inspector General, are independent oversight bodies because they are not led by sworn officers. But the reality is that they're extensively tied to the structures of the police department. And even if that were not true, they are certainly not independent of the mayor and the political establishment. And I would also add, and this is a very important component of this discussion, which is that we are actually not going to be the first city to take some of these measures. One of the features of this past election, the November election, has been the remarkable number of cities that had ballot measures related to police accountability. Now, they're not all carbon copy of each other. They don't, I don't believe any of them says elected, but the one thing that they're trying, that all those ballot measures tried to get to was the question of actually delivering accountability, and they are accomplishing them in different ways. Now, of course, those measures will be tested, in actual time in terms of whether they deliver or not. I don't have a crystal ball on that, but it is a question of what those ballot measures have said. And just to give you an example, in San Diego, Measure B changes. They had a civilian oversight. It changes the civilian oversight from the Advisory Community Review Board on Police Practices to Commission on Police Practices, which would have the power to subpoena witnesses and conduct investigations into police officer misconduct. Now, this has many of the elements that I'm talking about. It's not an elected, but it actually is mandated with power by this ballot measure, by the voter, by voters' intent. it would review complaints against officers and investigate all deaths that are a result of police interaction, including in custody deaths. And the commission, and this is where the substantive part comes in, the commission would be independent of the mayor and the city police department. So that's one example. But there have been many other measures that have been passed in Portland, in Oakland, in San Francisco, and other cities that I don't have time to get into. So the point being that this is, yes, this is substantive, but it is absolutely necessary for us to do something. The current model is not working. I really don't think anybody can make any honest claim that the current model is working, because it's simply not working. And again, I'm open to amendments which will bring in I'm open to saying independent of the mayor's office, city council, and the police department. If you want to remove elected, that's fine. I'm okay with having just the city attorney's office look at it. I'm okay with some of those proposed changes if council members are open.
Okay. Councilmember Swan, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Council President, who is up next, and appreciate you all sticking in there. Thank you, Council President, for waiting.
Sorry, toggling in between screens again. I will make this quick because we are 11 minutes past our designated hour for adjournment. But I just wanted to, as the council member who's been the public safety chair for the last 4 years and who was a prime sponsor of the 2017 Police Accountability Ordinance, wanted to just signal my support for Councilmember Herbold's argument in opposition to this particular item as included in the consent package. And I really want to encourage my colleagues to vote no on this particular item for all of the reasons articulated by Councilmember Herbold. While I think that there is a legitimate question and conversation that needs to occur about whether or not the 2017 version of the accountability system that we passed is still relevant today, I think that's a legitimate question to ask. What I'm concerned about with this slide is that it presupposes what the answer should be and to that question. And so I'm fine supporting any efforts from a policy perspective. And frankly, I don't think a SLI is required in order to have Councilmember Sawant do this body of work. She can do it with or without the SLI. But I do think that the question should be broad from a policy perspective of saying, is the police accountability system that we designed and developed and adopted as a council unanimously in partnership with community, is that system still relevant in 2020? And that's a different question than whether it's broken or fixed or needs fixing. But my biggest concern with this slide is that presupposes that the answer to that question is that yes, it is broken. And yes, it is no longer relevant. And the answer, as devised by me, is to have this other radically different approach and system in place. And so my preference would be to engage in true community outreach with the community partners to comply with our consent decree obligations and to not shy away from the overarching 30,000 foot question as I just described it. But I think it would be premature to have this council as a whole signal its support for the particular approach described in and being advocated for in this particular budget action. So I will not be supporting this particular item as part of the consent package. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Council President. Thank you, Councilmember Herbold, as well for your description of the concerns here, and Councilmember Sawant for your explanation of the intent here. I think that this was a more robust conversation than I anticipated. We are 15 minutes over. I am going to motion to recess because this is a 2-day meeting, and I think that this requires a little bit wrapping up, make sure that we get done with this and Councilmember Strauss's item. So we are going to go ahead.
Do we have a motion in front of us to vote on though?
We do have a motion, and I just checked with Ally. I believe we can still adjourn.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I would, if it's of any consequence, I would prefer that we vote on this item. And I do
Okay,
have
if you
a
guys
couple
are
of
gung ho to
points.
do this, let's do this.
I do want to respond quickly though, because I'm the sponsor.
Okay,
of
quickly.
this measure. I appreciate you all want to do this quickly, but I will say, Chair Mosqueda, I have taken very little time up in this meeting, and
I
these
get it.
questions
I
were
know.
brought
Go
by
ahead.
other council members, so I
Go
don't
ahead.
appreciate constantly being told to do that quickly. I'm doing as quickly as possible. Councilmember Gonzalez said that this amendment presupposes that the current system is broken. Yes, it absolutely is premised on the overwhelming fact that the current system is absolutely broken. And that is not my personal opinion as a socialist. This is something that has been widely recognized by a vast majority of people. In fact, my observation from having talked to hundreds of people about the demand to defund the police is that many people who don't agree with defunding the police actually strongly agree that yes, there need to be strong accountability system and that the current system is simply not working. So I'm not clear why that is a bad thing. That is actually the reality that this amendment is premised on. And the language in the amendment is, as I explained earlier in great detail, is along the lines of many ballot measures. And I also said I am open to adjustments in that language if we want to make them more consistent with some of the ballot measures that have already been passed by other cities. So this is, again, this is not my opinion. This is something that is being reimagined, if you want to use that word, by tens of thousands of ordinary people and activists in many other cities. So Seattle won't even be the first on this. So I do not agree with these insinuations from Councilmember Gonzalez that this is all somehow my opinion and this is my plan and that it'll be so terrible if the council votes on this. I mean, if your opinion is that the current system is somehow working, then, you know, that's your opinion and your vote will reflect that. But I just wanted to make it clear that this amendment is in no shape or form based on any personal opinions or biases that my office has. It is absolutely based on the fact on the ground that the current system is broken, that we need something better. And if council members don't agree with this and this amendment loses the vote tonight, then I would really welcome other council members to give their alternatives to how they would reimagine and actually accomplish police accountability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Clarification, I think, is warranted. Number one, I was not limiting anybody's time. The fact that I was willing to suspend this till tomorrow offered additional time for discussion. Number two, it is my understanding that I believed that this item here was going to be a request to law to work on that drafting and the research question. And I think that the question about how we make this in tandem with the central staff's work, wanting to recognize that central staff would be involved was part of what I suggested. So I hope I did not complicate things in that way. I do think the intent to make sure that law has the opportunity to research this as any other council office would put as part of their work plan. It just was lifting up this item to make sure that if this was something that was going to be done, that we were explicit about our intent to make sure that this was done in a way that was very transparent and in partnership with law and central staff. I am supportive of it. That's why I included it here. It does sound like it needs some additional amendments and scoping, and if it does not pass today, I think that with the sponsors' work on this, hopefully to make sure that this is a conversation that happens at law, it does not signal that, at least from my perspective, that this is not going to happen. I think it's just a matter of the right placement for this in a work plan and among our partnership with law. So with that, I don't see any additional comments or questions. There is no substitute. It has been moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll on law 002A001?
Lewis,
No.
Morales,
No.
Sawant,
Yes.
Peterson,
No.
Juarez,
No.
Strauss,
No.
Herbold,
No.
Gonzalez,
No.
Chair Mosqueda,
No.
1 in favor, 8 opposed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion does not carry. And we will move on, since we have one last technical item, and I think folks are anxious to get this wrapped up, to the last item here. Councilmember Strauss, I'm going to go ahead and move this in front of us so that you can move your amendment. I move approval of Council Bill SPD 016B001, included in voting group B consent package. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any comments or amendments? Councilmember Strauss, you are recognized to move your substitute.
Thank you. So we moved it. So after the second, oh, yep, here we go. I moved to amend SPD 016-B-001 to add the following to the end of the first sentence in the budget action description, or quote, or community safety and communications center, period, end quote. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Please continue if there's any additional clarification that's needed, and we can also turn it over to central staff to walk us through the difference.
Oh, just that that the community safety and communication center may be the right place to move some of these duties of the harbor patrol rather than the fire department. I think that it's important to analyze both departments. For instance, in Santa Monica, their harbor unit is a civilian unit responsible for all public safety on the Santa Monica Pier. It's staffed 24 hours a day, and they respond to a variety of water and pier beach related calls, including lifeguarding, scuba diving, EMT, rescue boat operations, and they have firefighting capabilities. So just realizing, much like the community service officers that we have here in the city, that the police department might not be the right place, Department of Neighborhoods isn't the right place, maybe it's the community safety and communication center. So just wanting to have both of those departments analyzed.
Great. And I see Greg available. Greg, is there any additional clarification you'd like to offer before we open it up for additional comments and questions on the substitute?
No, I don't have any additional clarification. Are we looking at the sum of all the changes here then?
Yes.
Okay, none.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there additional council members who'd like to offer comments? Councilmember Peterson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda, and thank you, Councilmember Strauss, for bringing this forward. Harbor Patrol is mainly located in District 4, actually, and but it serves all of Lake Union, Lake Washington, and beyond. So I'm just signaling my strong support for Harbor Patrol. I went on a ride along with them in surveying a lot of our districts from the waterways, and they do important work that I believe that this report may show that it's difficult to actually reallocate some of these responsibilities. So I'll be really curious as to how what the results are of this, but I'm always in favor of getting more data. So thank you.
Excellent. Any additional comments? Okay, Councilmember Herbold.
Just want to thank Councilmember Strauss for bringing this forward and really digging into this particular element of our reimagining public safety efforts here. Appreciate the expertise that he's working on developing related to Harbor Patrol. And just, I think it's just a really great example of how we are all working together as a council to really figure out, like, police department, policing's a big thing for the city. And the responsibility for moving policy reform in that area doesn't sit with one council member who happens to be the chair of that committee. So really enjoy the partnership that we have all experienced on this whole body of work since June. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. Close us out.
Yeah, thank you all. One of the things that I've heard loud and clear about Harbor Patrol, who I benefit from as well as a kayaker myself, is that they do proactive patrolling rather than being simply reactive. And so that is one of the most important items for me to see retained as we provide a consistent or expanded level of service on our fresh waterways here in the city.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for pulling this out and offering that clarifying amendment here. I don't see any additional comments or questions. This is our last thing we're going to do today, folks. So I'm going to try to get it right. We have before us this substitute. And if you could scroll up just a tiny bit for me here, Patty. Before I request the clerk to call the roll on the motion to substitute, I want to remind council members that a yes or an aye vote is an exception of the desire to include the substitute in a moment. A no vote is a rejection of the substitute and the desire to retain the version on the agenda for final consideration. So again, we're voting on the motion to substitute. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll to substitute?
Lewis,
Aye.
Morales,
Yes.
Sawant,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Juarez,
Aye.
Strauss,
Yes.
Herbold,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Chair Mosqueda,
Yes.
9 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion carries, and substitute SPD 016B001 is now before us. Are there any additional comments? I am not seeing any. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the approval of SPD 016B001?
Lewis,
Aye.
Morales,
Yes.
Sawant,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Juarez,
Aye.
Strauss,
Yes.
Herbold,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Chair Mosqueda,
Yes.
9 in favor, none opposed.
Madam Clerk, thank you very much. The motion carries and SPD 016B001 is approved. Okay, that got us through all of the items that were pulled from our from our Group B discussions. I appreciate the dialogue. I've learned quite a bit from our back and forth today. So thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Central Staff, for being available. We are going to continue items on our agenda tomorrow. The continuation will consider items pending on today's agenda. We will take up again our discussion at 9:30 tomorrow morning with items in Group C. Excellent. I'm not hearing any questions. A huge round of appreciation for a round of applause and appreciation for everyone who has stuck it out with us for this long meeting. Apologies for going over about a half an hour. Enjoy your evening. If there's no further questions, today's meeting is adjourned. See you tomorrow at 9:30. Public comments stand up at 7 a.m.